Imagine going back to 1994 and asking people what a hot product would look like in 2024. Chances are, it wouldn't resemble a Stanley Cup. Yet, here we are. The reusable water bottles are one of the most sought-after forms of beverage containment. Largely thanks to TikTok, Stanley's revenue jumped from $74 million in 2019 to $750 million in 2023. But look behind the massive sales, and there's a deeper case study in effective product marketing and leveraging cultural momentum.
I think with the Stanley Cup brand, you're not really buying into Stanley. You're buying into the community of all the other girls who have one in their hand. And it's very similar, in my opinion, to Jolie, the showerhead company that's gotten pretty popular through customers who post about it. And, on one hand, it's something to brag about, right? You have this amazing piece of hardware in your home. It's that with the Stanley Cups as well, but it's this sense of community. Like everybody's got their Stanley Cup, everybody's staying hydrated. It's something that signals, only good things.
Stanley Cups marketing has been successful in the diversity by which it's gone to market. So, Stanley Cup is a 110-year-old company, right? And the products aren't terribly novel since its conception 110 years ago. Like the only new product it's had as far as a new actual product was in 2016, 2017, the Quencher tumbler, right? They have different colorways since, but the product has been by and large very much the same. But the marketing savviness of Stanley Cup is its ability to not only do the traditional marketing means, but also leverage other vehicles by which the message is not only reaching new people, but done in new contexts, right? This diversity of communication, derivative works provides new opportunities to bring new people into the brand, into the idea. So they've partnered with content creators throughout TikTok that have taken the brand, taking its products and reworked it through their own cultural frames for people who self-identify or subscribe to a similar culture as that creator.
The success of Stanley's marketing is mainly credited to its company's president, Terence Reilly. This is the same man who made Crocs cool during his 5-year stint as the footwear company's chief marketing officer. After Reilly saw the now famous TikTok of a woman's Stanley Cup surviving a car fire and still containing ice, he said it showed the product is, quote, built for life, and offered the woman free Stanleys and a new car.
When I saw that he was at the helm of all this, you go, oh, of course, because it is a very similar playbook, not in its executions, but in its ethos, in that brands are not owned by the company. They are stewarded by the company, but they are co-created. Their meanings are co-created by the people. And if you invite people in to co-create value, to co-author the narrative, you share the pen with these people to be a part of the mythology and the folklore, they'll do things that you could never do. They'll take you in places that you can never be. They'll provide a level of media credence that you can never buy, because people trust people more than any form of marketing communications.
Stanley, the tough, all-steel thermos bottle that's completely dependable.
Stanley has always been kind of a blue-collar, utilitarian, masculine product, right? It had an efficacy, it had a utility, and not unlike what Yeti has done with coolers and probably their own tumblers and a portfolio of things. They've really found a way to expand appeal, to invite new users in, to capture a higher margin by redefining the brand for a new generation and new audiences, but it's all rooted in the product quality. We see the absolute power of scarcity, the absolute appeal of limited editions. And importantly, what we also see is desire and demand on full display, right? Social commerce hasn't just kind of catalyzed this, it's created community around it, which is yet another thing we see here, which is the power of community and ultimately identity.
Naturally, Stanley's warp speed rise in popularity has not been obstacle-free. There were the uncivilized situations at Target. the woman who was arrested for allegedly stealing $2,500 worth of cups, and customer concerns over potential lead content. The company responded to the concerns, saying it does use lead-containing sealing material during the manufacturing process, but that the lead-containing parts are covered with stainless steel, making the cups safe. That prompted competitors like Hydro Flask and Owala to take shots at Stanley in social media posts and promote the safety of their own products. But none of this appears to be slowing Stanley down.
They have a much better grasp on who their customer is and who's buying and why they're buying than probably most of the players in their category that sell through retail. If you look at Stanley as a company, it's not a company that was venture-backed and forced to grow over a couple years after launch. It's a brand that took its time to grow and mature and build brand affinity. And I think that's a great lesson, because a lot of people who start a brand today, they want it to blow up tomorrow. And they want, millions of fans who are diehard fans of their brand to be, really excited about what they're doing. But that takes a lot of time and consistency and continuity over the years. The other one, I think, is figuring out how you turn your brand or your marketing engine into, instead of a megaphone, more sort of a peer marketing engine.
I mean, it's interesting because Yeti, Hydro Flask, these folks were sort of mainstays in the category. And again, I've never seen an ad for Hydro Flask. I've only seen content for Yeti, particularly around the coolers online, but I've never seen an ad for it. But it's the cultural contagion of Stanley that has created such a gravitational pull. And I haven't seen the other brands sort of been able to leverage its power in this way, which says to me there's probably a lot of folks looking at this case study, their competitors, saying, how do we, if not do our version of this, but how do we, in a more savvy way of looking at it, how do we ignite our own version of cultural contagion in ways that are very unique to us and the people who know us and love us?
There's no question this isn't just net positive, it's net incredibly positive, right? And, mayhem at Target, which is what we saw when they released a limited edition color, right? First of all, people are going to people, and that's not Stanley's fault. That's not Target's fault, right? Idiots are going to be idiots. But again, what it does is it shows demand, it illustrates desire, it puts it on full display. We are all desperate, right? To connect, to belong, to express who we are, to have a means of identification that is culturally relevant. And that's just humans being humans. We were the same way when we were in the caves. The architecture of our brains is unchanged. And I don't think it's that bad to have what is a relatively affordable, quote unquote, luxury, an accessible, aspirational vehicle. If it makes you happy, do it, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else.
If you look at the shape of the last 30 years geopolitically, it's pretty obvious that what happens in the rise and fall of great nations is that step 1 is great success, step 2 is hard industrial power, step 3 is outsource all of the hard industrial power to lower cost countries. And then step 4 is, because you did that, you lost what made the country powerful and strong in the first place. And eventually that comes home to roost.
You've probably followed the stats that American manufacturing has actually declined in the past few years. It's actually stagnated. And I think that's because they've just hit a wall. There is no real productivity leap. There is no supercharged fuel underneath that will allow them to continue to grow. The old processes that were invented in the 1900s, the mid 1900s, just are done. They just don't work. They've gotten out all they can get out of them, and now they've started to slide backwards.
Los Angeles-based Hadrian has raised $180 million in venture funding to build out software-enabled factories for high-precision machine parts for aerospace and defense companies.
It was a real culture paradigm shift that we realized was, it's not about automating something because manufacturing people don't know what they're doing. It's just, how do you get the knowledge out of their heads, systemize it, get it in software and automation? That's really the trick.
Hadrian's founder is Chris Power. He's a 33-year-old Australian immigrant.
Australia is the best place to grow up or retire. Very rarely does anything big happen there. So personally, it always felt like sitting at the kids' table at Christmas. It was pretty obvious that the US is kind of the last great democratic experiment. In the next 50 years, it will be decided whether the CCP rules the world or it continues to be like a Western-led American order.
Hadrian's big idea was to build its own software-enabled facilities, rather than selling software to existing ones.
We're a company full of slightly insane people that believe in something slightly greater than themselves. We work with basically startups who are trying to develop new technology, either for space, the DoD, or deep tech in general. Neoprimes, where they're starting to become these massive companies and need a lot of manufacturing support. So our job is to basically accelerate the new entrants while helping the legacy or massive entrants that are the pillars of this country's manufacturing base transform their operations with technology and services very, very, very quickly.
Most automation is built around a very defined product, and automotive is probably the best parallel. So you have a production line making X type of cars or variations of cars, and you build automation in the highly repeatable task of where you're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. It works really well even in a machining environment when you're going to make a small subset of parts at a high rate. Where it tends to break is in introducing a mass amount of variability, and that's what our system was designed to go ingest. And so both with how we set up our process as well as how the automation is built is to try and take mass ambiguity and break it down into a set of standardized functions or tasks to make it digestible, to make it effective, and to really kind of give us a lot more of that variability management that you would typically struggle with.
Chris Power first approached SpaceX employee Chris Baker back in 2021 with what seemed like a crazy idea.
Chris originally reached out when I was managing the machine shops at SpaceX and had this wild idea that he wanted to automate the work I was doing in that factory. At the time, it was an extremely chaotic environment and was proof to me that what he was trying to push was not going to work. I think you lose a lot of faith in the fact that this can be automated when you've been surrounded by the type of hardware that we have to manufacture and the amount of different variables, both like human and just physics-based problems that the space is surrounded with. And you lose a lot of trust that you can really get down into each and every variable, standardize it, and build a system that can be replicated without a ton of human intervention.
Despite his original skepticism, Baker decided to join Power at his startup, named after the Roman emperor. Power, who is both relentless and charming, soon convinced investors to back his idea too.
Investing in Chris Power was a wonderful experience because he's one of those founders who's a true visionary, and he lights up, not just a room, but a whole market. He explains the need in terms of the supply going down, the demand going way up, in such a way that if you didn't know you needed it, now you know you needed it.
Chris's very first principles will challenge every aspect of anything you're saying cannot happen and really gets you to question kind of your underlying philosophy of why am I against this? What is holding me back? And so I think it's an extremely aggressively helpful way of approaching what we're going and building and what we're going and doing, because if you don't know at its core why it can't work, then you sure as hell better go figure it out.
It's long been hard for manufacturers to find people who want to work there.
You've got millions and millions of high-skilled labor shortage that is going to get worse because people are retiring. So we could train 10,000, 100,000 people over the next couple of years. We can't train millions. So it's like, how are they 10x more effective with software and robotics? And then where is the pool of people that we can make manufacturing exciting for, give them a great career? One of our core mission statements is to make meaningful jobs for the American workforce, and I think it's one of the things we've done the strongest at. The majority of the tour and interview process is held out on the floor around equipment, and a core element is seeing how they engage, what type of questions they ask, how interested they are in the specifics versus it just being a job or something to collect a paycheck. It's really, where are the pools of people that have similar skills that we can draw from and bring them into this industry where there is high talent density? And that's, retail, hospitality, oil and gas, ex-military, this is really anybody who wants to, who is able and willing to go. So we are down to a point where we can train and onboard anybody in 30 days. And the first part of that is using software and robotics to make it a lot less complicated. And the other part is training and workforce development to enable the new people coming in to be successful and grow as fast as they can grow.
The variety of people we have here is really cool. We have really super smart people and equally smart people without the experience, people who, this might be their first job.
Some of us have that context and have a little bit of mechanical engineering and manufacturing background. Most people really don't, and so when we try to bring them in here, we kind of tell them hey, we're going to teach you all that. The thing that you need is to be interested.
When I joined manufacturing, it was this dated thing that nobody wanted to be a part of, and I think we're building something that can change that dynamic. And so the entire kind of strength of the US economy, the US defense program, is built on the ability to go build things internal to the US, and I think we have the ability to go scale that, and we have the ability to get more people familiar and exposed in this environment and make them effective quickly.
Hadrian's revenue reached an estimated $3 million last year, its first year of commercial operations. This year, Power figures it will grow tenfold to at least $30 million. After that, he has big plans to open additional factories around the country.
So we invested in the summer of 2021, and the product was just being built at that time. So it has really gone from zero to exponential growth in that timeline. They've, not only brought their product to life, they've built a factory around it now, put those CNC machines on their software platform, and now have a wonderful set of customers, many of which are of course confidential, but are growing really, really well and have supercharged demand in that space.
In terms of where we were 2 years ago, or what we thought could have possibly happened, is we blown our expectations out of the water, and the proof is really in what customers think and also just how efficiently we're operating. We are 300 to 400% more efficient on how we utilize our capital equipment. Usually machines run 20% of the time. We are running at 79%, 80%, so we can get more with less. Secondly, we are about 6 to 10x more efficient on a workforce productivity basis. It's been 4 years since Chris and I really started talking, and again, I started in this I can't believe you're trying to do that, good luck state. Today we're about 100,000 square feet. It's a relative size of where we'll build our next factory as we bolt on different capabilities or really look to grow the size of the hardware we support. This is kind of the playbook we're trying to go build out and define for those future factories. But the ambition of the company is truly going to scale with us, and so the amount of processes we support, what we're trying to do to really be a single source, is really going to stress what that playbook looks like as we grow. The long-term vision is that we will do everything for everybody in core manufacturing for the US. Every 6 months or so, we roll out one of those new product lines to customers to expand the capability of what we can do. So ultimately, we will have 50 or so kind of very large facilities specialized in each of those areas so customers can tap into any one of those services depending on what they're making. What all leaders should aspire to do is make yourself obsolete. I think the interesting thing about Hadrian is I have no line of sight or vision to being able to do that based on the ambition of scale and growth, how we develop the workforce, just the amount of challenges in front of us, both technically with people, with just infrastructure in the country is so impactful and large that I really don't know where the road ends. I think if we can look back in a decade, yes, we're financially successful, but the test that I want to see is a guy or a girl is 17, they're deciding on what to do, and they're bragging to their friend at a bar that they got a job in manufacturing, they're really excited about it, opposed to, a software engineering job and a finance job. If we can make that cultural shift, that is the biggest thing, because everything is downstream from that.
Electric trucks are making waves in the transportation industry, especially in California. And there's a new contender in the green race, hydrogen-powered trucks. Unlike battery electric trucks, which store energy in batteries, hydrogen trucks convert hydrogen into electricity to power the vehicle. This technology promises longer ranges and faster refueling times, addressing some of the limitations of battery electric trucks. However, the hydrogen truck industry is still in its infancy. Currently, there are only a handful of these trucks on the road, and they're primarily operated by companies that are taking a chance on this new technology.
My name is Jim Gillis. I'm the president of the Pacific region of IMC. IMC is the nation's largest intermodal drayage firm headquartered in Collierville, Tennessee. My big worry has always been the driver fleet. There's an apprehensiveness to change, right? They like things the same. And so when you're moving them from a typical day cab tractor to one of these cab over designs, that's a big hurdle for them. But again, once they make that jump, they're very happy with the results and they love the experience. The feedback from the drivers, the fit and finish, it's referred to in our fleet as the Bentley of trucks. It's weird, when you first put a driver in front of it, that whole cab over design, kind of like a late 70s, early 80s model looking truck, they're very apprehensive. But once they climb into it and they go on one trip, they don't want to get back out.
I do like it. The innovative technology is amazing to me. I like the fact that it is zero emission with the ability to actually have that refuelability within 20 minutes. Also having the range of 500 miles to where we can pretty much adapt to all of our customers' needs. And honestly, the technology inside is amazing. Having the touchscreen infotainment system, the cab over design is probably the most comfortable ride I've ever been in, even within just a regular car. One of the differences is that the battery electric vehicle has a battery percentage. Once that's depleted, the truck has to be charged. The fuel cell electric vehicles, they actually have the hydrogen fuel cell that actually perpetuates the battery power by that electrochemical reaction. By having so much more of the hydrogen within the vehicle, you're able to actually propel the lifelong battery so you can go longer with it. The refuel time on the hydrogen electric vehicle is going to be 20 minutes when everything is running smoothly. The only time it gets pretty much a longer period of time is if they have any downtime at the fueling facility.
What we found with the battery electric is even if you put on a high-speed charger, 350 kilowatt charger, you still have an hour to 2 hour charge cycle compared to a 20-minute refuel with one of the hydrogens. And, to me, when I'm comparing to diesel, right, which is the gold standard of how our industry operates, that quick refuel cycle of a hydrogen fuel cell was the way to go.
If hydrogen trucks can overcome the challenges of infrastructure and production costs, as well as the cost of hydrogen fuel, they could revolutionize the trucking industry. With the potential for significantly reduced greenhouse gas emissions and increased efficiency, these vehicles could play a very crucial role in combating climate change and boosting the economy.
We decided a couple of years ago to do a toe in the water approach with the zero emissions technology. And so we purchased 6 battery electric trucks. Mixed results, right? We like the end result of zero emissions. We like the idea of helping to clean up the industry. but the reliability was a little suspect. And I also had a hard time with the charging infrastructure, particularly in Southern Cal. And so I started doing some research on alternative technologies, and we happened across hydrogen fuel cell and really kind of dug into it, spent some time with Nikola, went to the factory in Coolidge, Arizona, and walked away thinking, we need to go a little deeper. And so we did a big purchase order of 50, and hopefully soon we'll add another 50 in another market up in Oakland. With our battery trucks, we've got the extended battery packs, which makes it equivalent weight of the hydrogen fuel cell. I think the OEM lists the range at 200 to 220 miles. Our practical experience in Southern California is really 150 to 155. If you can get 100% fuel on board and get the full kg capacity, then you get 500 miles.
The state of California obviously is really pushing for cleaner trucks all the time. There's some pretty generous incentives right, for both battery and hydrogen trucks. For hydrogen trucks, it's a few $100,000, right? It is, right? Unfortunately, though, there are some restrictions from large fleets that are now in effect. And so a company like ours, we're going to be heavily restricted starting next year from really participating in those incentive programs. But for smaller fleet operators, a guy that's got 30 trucks or less, you're right. There's some heavy financial incentives for them to be able to make that jump. But I also would say that, while it's a great financial incentive, there are some barriers, right? And so, the weight of the truck does kind of limit the amount of cargo that you can handle. In terms of use, we haven't really had any problems. It's new technology. We know there's going to be some small issues from here to there, but I think the responsiveness from the Nikola team and Tom's Truck Centers has been outstanding. When we have an issue, they come and fix it. And so I like it. I think zero emissions does have some barriers, particularly the vehicle weights. But I think for the majority of the cargo that we're running in Southern California, this technology does work.
I think solar is really the future, and it's absolutely taking off. And most new energy is a solar installation, and we're only going to amplify that. If you can get rid of the nighttime thing, that's really the only thing holding it back.
You're with Ben Nowak, founder of Reflect Orbital. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
So your company, satellites, solar energy. I have a 10-year-old son. He would love this. He loves space. He loves science. Explain to me what you guys do as if I'm a 10-year-old.
Yeah, we are putting mirrors in space to reflect sunlight onto solar farms after dark. So there's a shadow behind the Earth. Sunlight hits on this side, doesn't hit on this side. Our satellites are right here, so we can reflect the sunlight right down to those shadow regions.
So it's like having a giant mirror and pushing it down into the Earth.
Yeah, we capture the sunlight in space and bring it down to solar farms, large towns. If somebody needs some light, we can get it to them.
How big are these mirrors?
They're fairly small, just like about the size of a tennis court or something like that at first. Eventually, as we scale up, we launch more and more of them. And then you start making them larger and larger, and you kind of do it like that. But the way to think of it is we are trying to get as much area into space as possible, as much thin plastic reflective area into space as possible, and control it really well so we can get sunlight to the people who need it. And we're going to need a lot of it because there's actually a lot of people who want sunlight, especially when you start talking about gigantic billion-dollar solar farms.
Yes.
So we are going to put a lot of area into space.
So when they talk about tech, they always say hardware is hard. You're taking hardware and putting it in space. I can't even imagine how complex this is. Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, I've been thinking about energy for a really long time. I built like a small fusion reactor in high school.
Like nuclear fusion?
Yeah, the simple one. It didn't make energy, but it did fuse atoms together, deuterium atoms. So I made that in high school, made X-ray machines.
Where'd you get your material from?
The Nuclear Regulatory Commission approved it, and I bought it from Airgas.
Okay,
once you get the right approval, you can buy it, pretty locally.
All right, interesting. Okay, so you're obsessed with energy.
Yeah, obsessed with energy. Built a lot of RC planes, all kinds of engineering projects in school. I was trying to make antimatter for a little while as well. Realized that was a little crazy, so I kind of took the normal path. Went to SpaceX, got an internship there my freshman year of college.
How do you make antimatter?
You make fluorine-18 first, and that emits positrons, and positrons are antimatter. So you can use those, and I was going to try to harvest them and get some energy from that. but you need a linear accelerator in order to do that. And large arrays of power. So I remember I was going to Brigham and Women's Hospital and talking to radiologists there, looking at their linear accelerators, thinking how I was going to copy them, and they all told me to not do that. And I took their advice, and I'm kind of glad I did.
Okay, you and I had very different hobbies, so
yeah.
that is fine. What were you doing before you started Reflect Orbital?
I was working at a company called Zipline. They deliver blood and medical products with drones in like Rwanda, Ghana, places like that. And they're bringing that to the US. So I was working there when I had the idea for this. It started off, I realized that solar energy was leading the world for a long time. Like solar is a great way to make power. You get free energy from the sun. It's a lot better than fossil fuels in that way until the sun goes down. Then it stops working. And then you need something else to come in and kind of fix it because you have that variability. And you can make the solar panels more efficient, but really the problem is you're not getting the fundamental resource, sunlight. And even if you have a solar panel in Germany, you move that to the Sahara Desert, it'll make 3 times more energy. That's just a huge difference because of the fundamental input resource, the sunlight. And I recognized that, and I was like, wow, sunlight is kind of everything with solar. It's not about the panels, it's not about how efficient they are or where they're built. It's all about the sunlight itself. And we need to get them more sunlight so that they can work at night. And I started looking at ways to move sunlight around on the Earth, because I saw this huge potential energy difference. And I realized the biggest potential energy difference is from space to the ground. It's kind of like a gigantic dam, where like the shadow of the Earth is, the biggest dam ever, holding back more energy than we could ever use. And all we have to do to access it is put some satellites up there and reflect some power down. And mirrors are really efficient for that. So the math works out quite well.
Well, this is a wild, literally a moonshot idea.
Yeah.
How did you go from having this idea that sounds like science fiction and then quitting your job and saying, I'm going to start a company to make this happen?
Yeah, I always knew there'd be a day that I'd start a company. So I've been training for it for a long time. I've gone through like hundreds of ideas before having this one, and I would chase them out, as far as I could go before they started seeming crazy or something like that. And I developed a really good taste for it. I also built a lot of projects.
Okay.
I worked at SpaceX, but I also did tons of projects outside of work just to kind of like build up my skills, build my endurance.
What's your training?
That.
Are you a trained engineer?
Yeah, I have a mechanical engineering degree.
Okay.
But also I worked at SpaceX on Dragon 2 as an intern, did 2 internships there, and then worked at a couple startups after that.
Okay, so you have this idea to literally put giant mirrors in space. You have the idea, what's the next step from making that idea to actually becoming a company?
Yeah, so we raised some money.
Just on the idea alone?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there was a lot of work that went into like the pitch deck and like making sure it was clean, and I did a lot of math. I did like several months to a year and a half of mathematics on my own, just basically alone in a very small garage. And eventually, it all started working out, and I could kind of prove that everything had a reason to exist. So we've raised $8.5 million so far. And that's enough to launch a couple satellites to space. We're launching our first one in June of next year.
Wow.
And it's going to be a fairly small one, like scaled down. It'll be a 10 by 10 satellite, a bit brighter than the moon. It'll last about as long as a solar eclipse. And we were, wondering if, we were originally planning on it just being an engineering display. So we could just use it to do calculations. We were going to do it with like, dozens of laboratories around the world and a couple of our potential solar farm customers. We're going to take measurements. And then you're like, what if we could serve a different market? Like we should see if people want to just use this for, whatever they want. It's something as a service, who else wants it? We made a quick video, it got 55 million views in just a couple weeks, and we have 182,000 applications for our sunlight.
Wow.
As of just a couple weeks ago.
You're going to go in and raise $8 million with just a pitch deck in hand and an idea. What were you pitching? How did you sell these VCs on this wild idea?
It was a pitch deck, it was a bunch of math, it was like 50, 60 little prototypes. We also, that was across 2 rounds. So we also did a hot air balloon test with an 8-foot by 8 foot.
Yeah, I want to hear about this.
Mylar.
Yeah, I want to hear about this, your proof of concept here.
Yeah, so we put an 8-foot by 8-foot Mylar mirror on the bottom of a hot air balloon and went out to the desert.
Like a hot air balloon that like tourists take? Or Okay.
Yeah, it was a huge mirror. Like 2 big pieces of plywood, like a ping pong ball table of mirror. And then we had it on an actuated robot arm, and we could reflect that down onto a mobile solar farm. And we actually reflected sunlight down and measured the power that we delivered to these solar panels. It was basically like 2,600x smaller scale than the satellites will be. So you can scale everything up by that amount, and it worked quite well. Mirrors work. We didn't really need to prove that, but getting the Mylar surface to be actuated well and actually perform the measurement was.
How does your machine and satellites? How do they do I can imagine the complex calculations, the micro adjustments to not to A, you're hitting the sunlight, and B, you're, taking like a magnifying glass and hitting a spot on the rotating Earth. Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, so the satellites themselves move in a similar way to a dirt biker. They'll rev the engine a little bit so the back wheel speeds up and that pitches them up, or they'll hit the brakes and that'll slow down the back wheel and that'll pitch the motorcycle forward. We kind of do the same thing. We just have wheels that spin up and we can rotate our satellites like this. The satellite itself is just a flat surface. So there's no focusing that the satellite is doing. It's just reflecting the light from the sun down onto the ground. It's about a 5-kilometer diameter spot on the ground. And then if you want that spot to be brighter, you just have like 2 satellites work together to provide the same brightness, or 10, 100, 1,000, however bright you want that spot to be. We can dim it and tailor it to whatever you want. And we can also move that around by just moving all the satellites.
How high, how strong is the sunlight?
It depends on how many satellites you have working together. So one satellite could be, one small satellite, like the first demo one, will be a little bit brighter than a full moon, which is pretty dim compared to sunlight.
Yeah.
But then, once you start adding a couple hundred together, you can, get to a fifth as bright as the sun, or even brighter than that.
So you'd have 100 satellites all focused in on one focal point?
I mean, it'll never be exact. Like, it's going to be many. Okay. It'll be dozens, hundreds, thousands, that kind of thing. But it's also, when you're talking numbers, it's really about the area that you have in space. So if you make the satellites bigger, it's less satellites. If you make the satellites smaller, it's more satellites. It just kind of depends on, what rocket we're launching on, what the avionics cost, and, a couple little trades like that.
Is this sunlight, this solar radiation, is it safe? Are you going to fry people?
You can't fry people. Well, I mean, you can if you launch it enough satellites, but we're not going to launch that many satellites.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how, if this is happening, is it gonna, if I'm on the ground, is it gonna light my, I've seen your, for solar farms, but I think you also said in your, kind of thinking blue sky, it's film production, or there's a Monday night football game, and instead of having all the lights, we can direct the sunlight. How far out are we from that? And also, if I'm living in that area, is it am I going to get sun pollution? Am I going to get light pollution? Is it going to seem like it's midday because your satellite's down near my house? How does that work?
Yeah, so by the end of next year, we'll be able to simulate that for 4 minutes or so.
Okay.
The year after, it'll be a half hour or something like that. And it will be mostly lit up on the ground. You're not going to see a beam coming down from space or anything like that. It's just going to be a nice little warm light, about what street lights provide. But it's going to be a lot higher up than street lights. So, my house has a street light outside the window, and it always glares in my window, and it's kind of annoying. Our satellite's going to be directly overhead, so it's going to be, actually quite nice. Wow. And just lighting up the whole area in very smooth general light. And it's not going to be spraying too much in the air. It's mostly just going on the ground. This is actually how you do dark sky safe lights, or if you're doing stadium lighting for a soccer field, you'll have shades on it, so it just points down. We're doing a similar thing. So it's actually, fairly good on light pollution. Mm-hmm. And then the light itself is just full spectrum of sunlight. So it's, one of the healthier forms of light that you can have. It's not like an LED where you have a ton of blue light, and then, that makes your melatonin receptors, it basically blocks the melatonin production.
Okay.
So our lights don't have as much of that as LEDs for the same comparative brightness.
Yeah, not like the blue light we have all around us.
Right
now.
Yeah, this is hard to sleep with.
How do you make money? Or how are you going to make money?
Yeah, we just offer the service. So we kind of position ourselves as a natural resources company. So we're selling sunlight as a natural resource to people. And, we have figured out how to produce that. We've also figured out how to bring that to people in a way that's super fast and easy. And realistically, there's no reason you can't just get it from your phone. You could just text us your latitude and longitude, and we can send you some sunlight. It's only going to be a couple $100s an hour. And, that's about it. And we just need to know your coordinates and, know that there's satellites flying overhead. So the first couple will be a little weird. You'll have to be, doing something at the right time. So you have to kind of plan with us. But the year after that, it'll be basically anytime within this window of time you can use the service. And then as it gets more and more, it'll be every single night, just use it if you want to. And there'll be, bigger commercial customers, entire cities will be able to sign up for it as well and be yeah, we're booking the next 10 years. And, we can work with them to figure out if that makes sense. And then, just get them that sunlight every single day for 10 years.
Yeah. How much is it going to cost to launch one of these satellites?
So the first satellite we're launching is going to be $430,000 to launch. Okay. It's just a little CubeSat guy. But then after that, you can package it onto the rockets in a lot better way, so you can get a lot more area into space for a lot cheaper. Mm-hmm. It's kind of starting off in the worst case, most expensive scenario, just to make sure the satellites work.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, I mean, the goal is really just get as much mirror area into space as possible. And when you're filling a rocket with these things, you can design the satellites to fit in the rocket a bit better, and you can get a lot of area into space.
So your goal is to spend probably hundreds of millions of dollars to put these satellites in space, and then earn the money back through kind of sunlight as a service? You said like subscription model, people pay you for the hour, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's a bit less than hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay.
Yeah, you can start bootstrapping it in like in the tens.
How many satellites do you want to have up there?
In the end?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't like talking numbers of satellites. We like talking about area. I mean, what we want to do is we want to make a difference in the US's energy mix or the global energy mix. Like, you can't really get above like 30% wind and solar without the grid becoming so unreliable that, you know, it's just not worth putting any more in. And we want that to change. We want solar to be more of humans' energy because the sun is just so good. It's just like this infinite energy source. So we could bring that 30% up to like 50 or 60%. That's really what we're shooting for. And that's the future I want to live in, where everything's powered by solar energy and it just kind of feels free to use and you're not burning fossil fuels anymore. And we can do that with the sun. You know, the sun makes the sun in 1/5000th of a second makes more energy than humans have ever produced. So it's quite a good fuel source.
That is a stat.
Yeah.
How many employees do you have?
Oh, we're just 7 full time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who makes your satellites?
We do. Yeah.
How you?
Almost all in house. I mean, we have a couple vendors for different parts, but we like assemble everything. We're putting it together, and then we will phase out basically all of our suppliers.
It's all in hand.
Yeah.
And what do these satellites look like? I know there's a giant mirror.
Yeah, it's like a little guy like this, and then the mirror deploys out of that.
Okay.
It's very similar to a solar sail vehicle. If you look that up, it's like tape measure booms, like 4 tape measure booms, and then they pull out this like thin reflective surface, like a potato chip bag. It's just shiny and then thin plastic. And you just pull it really tight and it gets super shiny and flat.
Wow.
We have a couple tricks to how we do that well. Because you want that spot to be really, really sharp so it just goes where you want it. But yeah, there's not that much to them. They're actually quite simple on the scale of satellites. They're much lighter than a Starlink satellite, which is SpaceX's telecom satellites. And they don't have the phaser antennas. They don't have to serve like dozens of customers. It's just one satellite and we just have to move it around.
You were working at Zipline right before launching this company?
Yep.
What were you doing specifically for Zipline?
I was working as a mechanical engineer on the launcher system, which is how they launch planes into the air for Rwanda and Ghana.
Okay.
And then I met my co-founder there, Tristan.
Yeah, I've seen those videos. They're amazing.
Yeah.
When they shoot them off.
They're
dropping blood into it's insane.
Yeah.
What was the spark that made you say like I'm gonna leave Zipline and start this company? What was like that moment?
The seed happened when I was watching a YouTube video on the problem of solar power in Africa. And the EU was looking at spending $40 billion to build a bunch of solar farms in the Sahara Desert and then ship the power to Europe. And I was just blown away by the value of that. Like, it's worth $40 billion to bring energy from this place of high sunlight to low sunlight. And it immediately just clicked in my brain like, oh, this is like one of the biggest gradients I've ever seen. Because throughout my life, I've done calculations on like, what if you take all the mountains and get energy from lowering them into the oceans? Like, okay, that would power humanity for like 200 years. Or like, what if you slowed the moon down, and slowed the earth down and made a moon turbine? Like, how much energy would that produce? How long could that power humanity? I've done like all these calculations.
Again, you and I have very different hobbies.
Yeah. and I missed this one. I didn't see this one. I didn't see the sunlight gradient. Once I saw it, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I just stayed up till 4 a.m. for weeks doing math. And I was originally trying to move sunlight around in vacuum tubes. I was like, I'll move the sunlight from the Sahara Desert to Europe in vacuum tubes. And it was $30 billion, which is still insane. But it was just the idea of moving the sunlight around. And then I realized wait, moving sunlight from space to the ground is so much more leveraged. There's so much more energy availability. You don't have the nighttime thing, and you can serve places that do have the nighttime problem. So just the difference in value was insane. And then, I had the experience from SpaceX, so I had the confidence to just, I was like, I can build a satellite. It's not gonna be that hard. Just figured everything out, started doing all the math, and it works quite well. With all the solar farms that we already have on Earth, it's already economical. We can beat the price of batteries fairly easily. And then and then all these other markets started developing. So there's obviously serving towns, all around the world, like Scandinavia in the winter, that kind of thing. All the wedding proposals, all that kind of more niche stuff. But then there's construction projects.
What do you mean wedding proposals?
Yeah, we got a lot of applications for people who want to propose to their spouse.
Under the sunlight?
Yeah, because you could flick the satellite on. It's I want to propose to the light of my life with the big light from space.
What about clouds?
Yeah, clouds are in the way sometimes. So you got to pick the right day when it's not super cloudy out. Look, for us, it's not so bad because we can move the spotlight around within a couple 100-kilometer area. But if it's not the right day in your time, we can just schedule for in the next 1 or 2 days, something like that.
Does this affect the ecosystem? Are you heating up the Earth more?
It affects an incredibly small piece of the ecosystem. And it's also not that much energy. It's just basically just hitting the solar farms themselves. And when you do the calculation out of the energy added by our system versus the energy added by fossil fuels, they're like, we add a little bit more just direct heat, but the really important thing with fossil fuels is how much CO2 you're releasing in the atmosphere. We release almost no CO2, it's just the rocket launch, and that, that breaks even quite quickly. But then like the long-term effects of having that CO2 in the atmosphere forever, of the, just burning fossil fuels is so much worse than what we're doing. It's way more total heat added.
Gotcha. You're obviously an expert in energy, expert in green tech. We hear so much, there's so much hype around green tech right now, so much greenwashing, all these different ideas, so much like people on the spectrum saying like, kill all fossil fuel now versus like go off fossil fuel. Like, where do you see, what kind of technology and systems in place that are really going to make a difference in this climate change battle?
Yeah, I think we need to use a lot more energy, and it can't come from fossil fuels. So energy use per capita in the US has basically stagnated since the 1970s. We're not using more energy, even though we live in super developed places, and we want to use more energy, we want to drive more places, we want to do more things, we want to refine more metals, but we don't really do that because it's not quite worth it.
So we're actually getting more efficient.
Maybe more efficient, maybe using less, maybe building less.
Okay.
I remember, when I was really young, I used a whole megawatt hour of electricity. My dad got pretty mad about that. And it's like, sometimes you just can't use less. Like I thought very hard about like, how can I use less energy? And it's like, no, if I want to build the stuff that I want to build, I need to use like much more energy. And there's basically nothing that I can do about it. And it's like, there's a certain amount of iron that we want to refine. There's a certain amount of stuff that we want to ship around the world. It really affects the GDP when you can't use more energy. And we're kind of in that situation with fossil fuels where it's not so much that we can't use them, it's that it's frowned upon. It's that people don't use them enough. It's that it's not like, oh yeah, let's just do it, who cares? There's like social impacts, there's consequences, and that's kind of how it starts, right? So it's not just like this free thing that you can use. Whereas sunlight is just this kind of free thing that you can use. I lived in a van for a while, I had solar panels on my roof, and like if I wasn't using the 400 watts that it was generating, it was just kind of a waste. Like I might as well just like make a spark and just like look at it for all day. Like it's not a waste because it's using all that energy anyway.
You lived like van life, like a full van? Like,
oh yeah.
Why'd you do that?
I like to surf.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't like paying rent. Yeah.
Are you still in the van?
I'm not in the van. My sister's in the van now.
All right.
I lent it to her.
You recycled it.
Yeah, she's living her surf dreams.
What do you kind of think with AI right now? We have to talk about AI, but obviously what it can do for controlling the energy in the grid, but then also the fact that these AI farms they're so thirsty for energy.
Yes.
Where do you see solar playing in that?
Yeah, we talk to a lot of grid operators, a lot of solar farms that are serving AI. It's pretty interesting because energy in the past has been like, a steel mill or something random that has some variability, and the grid has to keep up with that random variability. And with data centers, it's just this stable power. We need 24 hours of maximum power, and it can never drop from that. And that's what data centers demand. Like, that's what you need. And with solar, it doesn't work for that because it's like full power and then the sun goes down and it doesn't work at all. And it's like, okay, how do we fill in this? And it's like wind. Wind is like, what if it's not windy? You get all these issues, batteries, it's a big problem. So you end up burning, natural gas or, installing a nuclear power plant, which, by the way, we're not currently building new nuclear power plants in the US, so that's also a big issue, and it takes like 17 to 22 years. So we should fix those. Like I'm very pro-nuclear, but it's not going to be immediate.
You build them you were building them in high school, so
yeah, well, a different kind. Yes. But yeah, it's a huge problem. Like they need this incredibly stable base load power, and ideally it would come from solar, but that doesn't work right now. So yeah, we come in and we can make solar more of a base load power.
Okay.
We'll start off not doing fully through the night. We'll start off with just like the first couple hours after the sun goes down and before the sun rises, and that makes a huge difference. You need way less batteries. But yeah, that's where we're starting, and we're going to continue to build out the constellation.
Outside of what you're building, what are kind of your big predictions for the future of energy outside of the satellites?
Yeah, I mean, energy is a hard one. It's one of those ones that has an incredibly, it's a very slow growth rate or on new technology developments. Like it's obviously huge, commercialized. Like you talk to anybody in the energy sector and they're like, yeah, I raised like $50 billion for XYZ projects. So the growth, the building is incredibly high. I think most things are going to be powered by solar in the future. I think everybody's going to have solar on their roofs. In Australia, it's actually cheaper to have solar panels on your roof generating power than it is to have just maintenance on the power lines to your house in a lot of cases. So I think things are going to become much more local. I think things are going to become much more solar. I think solar is also really good thing to build, in developing nations like, Africa, South America, places like that. It's really cheap and easy to build a solar farm. It's like a bit of initial investment, but once you build that thing, it makes its power back really quickly. So it's the kind of thing that you can scale up super fast. Like you can just stick them on the ground. You don't even have to mount it to the ground. You can just place a panel on the ground and it starts making power. So I think solar is really the future, and it's absolutely taking off. And most new energy is a solar installation, and we're only going to amplify that. So I like throwing that in.
Yes.
But I think solar is just going to be the future, and everything's going to be powered by solar quite soon. It's just if you can get rid of the nighttime thing, that's really the only thing holding it back.
Love it. Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm in Las Vegas this morning on a sunny, hot day. We're here to mark the start of construction of Brightline West. This is expected to be the first high-speed rail project that's operational in the United States. The goal by its developer, Wes Edens, a billionaire who owns the Milwaukee Bucks and the Aston Villa Football Club in the UK, is to have this thing built in 4 years for a total cost of $12 billion. And the expectation is that it's going to be operational in time for the Summer Olympics in LA in 2028. So this project, if it moves as fast as expected and stays on budget and on time, would be the first true bullet train in the United States, running at speeds of up to 200 miles an hour or more, and do that within about 4 years. Wes Edens, the guy behind this, is a private equity billionaire. He's a part owner of the Milwaukee Bucks NBA franchise. He also owns the Aston Villa Football Club in the UK and other European soccer teams. Wes has been fixated on doing this project for years. Previously, Brightline opened its first private railway in Florida a few years ago, and last year added a new extension connecting that project from Orlando all the way down to Miami. To learn a little bit more, Forbes had an exclusive opportunity to sit down with Wes Edens, who is the chairman of Brightline, as well as U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, to understand what this project means both for Wes and his company, but also more broadly, high-speed rail in this country. Finally, groundbreaking for Brightline West, and you expect this to be the first high-speed rail system in the United States when it opens. Do you really think you can get this 218-mile system between Las Vegas and Southern California built within a 4-year timetable?
100%. It's not just a wild speculation on our part. That's the product of a tremendous amount of work and time and money that's been put into it already. And we kind of broke the system up into segments, so we're not really starting at one place to get to the other. So you'll see simultaneous activity along the corridor for this. The rolling stock, is something we are actually out, putting out for the bids right now. So it's something that we want to get, off the drawing boards and into production soon. So all those things together, we really do believe that the timeline is both an aggressive one, but a very achievable one. And we think 4 years from now, we'll have a train where we're standing right now.
And you're confident it'll be operational in time for the LA Summer Olympics in 2028?
We are. There's the things we control and things we don't control. So we think that we can control the construction part of it. At the end of it, there's then a very lengthy process of then making sure that it qualifies for all the FRA and government guidelines for this. And there hasn't been a high-speed train to test against. So that's a little bit of ambiguity. But we do feel like that was the target all along. We feel like having President Biden ride before the end of his second term is a big part of it's always good to have a goal, and that's a goal that we have, and we're excited about it.
Mr. Secretary, this project is happening with a lot of federal support, a $3 billion grant, $3.5 billion in private activity bonds. Is this the model, or in this case, are you trying to just get things going and help fund this particular project and hoping that stokes up interest?
Well, we do believe that when this project is complete, it's going to open the floodgates for American expectations around high-speed rail. It won't anymore be, I just got back from Japan, why can't we have that? It'll be, I just got back from Vegas, why can't we have that in the Midwest or in the Northwest or wherever I live as a domestic tourist in the United States? Mm-hmm. This is important because it really establishes that it can be done here, which, by the way, of course it can be done here. This is the United States of America, but in the past, we haven't invested invested enough to make this happen. I'll tell you, the federal funding coming into this project came from a very competitive process. So it was not done lightly. They had to hit all sorts of marks in order to qualify, both for the $3 billion in grants and the $3.5 billion in financing that's coming to support this project. But we wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in it. And human experience and American experience has demonstrated that projects of this level of ambition are difficult, they're doable, and they're hugely impactful when they actually get achieved.
This is not the first groundbreaking for a high-speed rail project. Next door in California, one's been underway for a while, but the timeline is a lot longer, the costs are a lot greater. There's a big chunk of the budget that no one knows exactly where that's going to come from. Should California consider working with a Brightline West or another private entity to maybe help that project get built all the way from LA to San Francisco?
Well, the structure, the scale, and the distance of the California project make it quite different from this one. But what I will say is, the more you do it, the more you do it. In other words, the more we have functioning high-speed rail up and running in the United States, the more we have a nationwide readiness for it, both in terms of customers, passengers, and in terms of the professionals who work on it, who, when they encounter a problem, they're not encountering it for the first time. I think that's already served Brightline well because of their experience, not what we would consider high-speed in these terms, but real experience delivering an important train service in Florida. And I think in turn, the California project and this and every other high-speed rail vision in America can all benefit from each other because we build that muscle memory as a country on how to do this, and that industry as a country, that domestic high-speed rail industry that I think could take its place alongside the auto industry and the aviation industry as a huge employer and driver of value in the United States.
Wes, you've been thinking about this a long time, and as mentioned, you're already operating the Florida system. You're now starting with this one, but you've mentioned there are other intercity routes that look very compelling. Is there another one that looks as doable? Because obviously in this case, a lot of the regulatory approval was done, a lot of the environmental approval was done, the land was acquired. So this one seems to have many things working in its favor. Are there others that both look attractive but also have some of the same elements going for it?
Yeah, I think there are actually many others. And I think that probably the major development between version 1.0 in Florida and version 2.0 here in Vegas, LA, is moving off an existing rail system and into an already disturbed transportation corridor, which is I-15. And so there's lots of highways that connect these city pairs that are attractive. So the too far to drive, too short to fly, with two big population centers, that's the secret sauce of this. Putting it in the middle of the highway, I think, actually solves a lot of issues. You can basically, you can create your own system. You can put a fence around it. There's no rail crossings. You can go at true high speeds, 200 miles, plus an hour. So there's a lot of those. So when we look around the country, there's very obvious ones. The whole kind of Texas triangle of, Dallas to Houston, Houston to San Antonio, Austin there. That's one that obviously makes sense in terms of the economic profile of it. Portland to Seattle and that whole area of the world. The Midwest, even, like you look at places from, Cleveland to Columbus and whatnot. So I think that there are many, many expressions of it. You need to de-risk it by getting one done. What the secretary said, I really believe in, is like, it can't be a second until there was a first. But once you have a P&L, you can look at it, you can see that the revenue projections are correct, you can see that the ridership is correct. That's what will really catalyze this. And I think that there's a number of places that'll go. And I think this first one it's not just the development of the system that's important, it's the development of the entire industry. That's the really exciting, that's the milestone for me that I think will be really notable when we look back on this in years to come.
And what's your ridership target for SoCal to Vegas once things are sort of like annualized after a year or two of operation?
There's about 50 million trips that happen between Las Vegas and Los Angeles. About 85% of those happen by car, right? When you look at the amount of time that you save people, that's a big indicator of how many people are going to ride your train. So simply put, the more time you save them, the more you're going to do it. There's few places you're going to save people more time than between here and LA. Right, that ride is at best a long ride, and at worst it's a lot worse than that. So we think that a pretty good percentage of the 40 plus million that are on that will get onto our train. I think our initial estimates are around 12 million is kind of a stabilized number. But I really believe long term we'll have a capacity problem more than a ridership problem, because I think that this is just such a compelling opportunity for people versus driving across the desert that I think it'll be really, really amazing.
And over time, do you see an opportunity to connect from Rancho into actual Los Angeles proper?
Well, we are connected on the metro system, right? So basically, you can walk across the tracks and get onto the MetroLink system. That's a very active, very, very productive system in Southern California. Would love to see that get electrified. Would love to aspire one day to get down there, but that's not part of the plans right now. And I say I'd like to get electrified because I'd like to see fewer emissions kind of everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I think that would be an obvious choice for it. But when you look at the system itself, I-15 kind of comes down the pass and it goes into the LA basin. Everything goes from there. So putting a train station right there is really a sensible thing, right? That's what 100% of the people that drive to Las Vegas have to drive past our train station, right? So that's a very, very good place to start. So the train station itself is not a second choice at all. We think that obviously Union Station is an iconic place and that'd be a lot of great things, but there's that's not really the destination that we view as important as the Rancho Station.
Mr. Secretary, what looks like the most promising next project after this one?
We know our corridor identification program is funding several early planning efforts around the country. The Texas Central Railroad that would go Dallas to Houston, the Cascadia Vision that would connect Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland, Charlotte to Atlanta, which given the amount of economic growth happening there, and just the population layout of that part of the South, also incredibly compelling. And there's more where that came from. Look, we know it's going to take federal support to get some of these projects onto the drawing board, let alone turn them into a reality. But that's exactly why we need to be working now toward that longer range future. And to those who say, well, this isn't Europe, that's true, it isn't Europe. We're doing this on American terms. But what we definitely have in America are these kinds of geographic layouts where you got lots of city pairs that are an uncomfortably long drive or an inefficiently short flight apart from each other. Those are excellent candidates for high-speed rail.
And which of those pairs is your next choice? Which do you think looks most compelling?
Don't know. We're so focused on this right now. We haven't picked, kind of the next one. I'll say this: we've been contacted by a lot of different governors and whatnot that are curious about this. I think today is a real milestone to see that this is a reality that's now happening. And I think that there could easily be, like I say, a handful of these things that turn into real projects from our standpoint in the next 12 to 24 months. So it's an exciting time for it.
So of the funding for this project, $5.5 billion from private sources. Are you one of those private sources? Are you putting in your own money?
I am one of those private sources. I've actually put my money where my mouth is. So, I've been invested in this project for a very long time. And, obviously we think it's going to be a compelling investment. I think that in my own life, I've tried to find things that I can focus on where you're doing well by doing good and something that really makes an impact. And I think that the impact from this is going to be long lasting and it's going to be, prodigious. And so I'm just really excited to be a part of it. And I want it to be successful because I want the next one and the next one and the next one to happen.
A fight over a vital federal tax credit intended to kickstart a market for low and no carbon hydrogen and worries over high production costs are cooling near-term expectations for the green hydrogen fuel. Hi everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Alan Onsman, my Forbes colleague and co-author of the Current Climate newsletter. Alan, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, happy to be with you.
You recently reported that green hydrogen's hype hit some very expensive hurdles. So before we dive into what those hurdles actually are, I would like it if you could define some terms for our audience. For those who aren't aware, what's the difference between clean hydrogen, green hydrogen, and dirty hydrogen?
Well, pull out your Crayola box because you're going to need to know about colors in this case. Hydrogen, if you remember your junior high or freshman year chemistry class, hydrogen's the number one element on that periodic table, with the atomic number 1. It's the most abundant element in the universe. The sun runs on it. It's great. The problem is it doesn't normally exist freely in nature. So to use it, you have to make it from something. Hydrogen likes to cling to things. And we use about 92 million tons of hydrogen globally every year for industrial processes, refining oil, making chemicals, fertilizers, in the food industry, all sorts of things. And so we already use lots and lots of it. And nearly all of it is made from using steam to pull it out of natural gas, because natural gas is CH4. It's got carbon and 4 hydrogen molecules. When you do that, you release carbon dioxide. So traditional industrial hydrogen, it's kind of dirty. Hydrogen itself, perfectly clean. No carbon, no nothing on its own. But again, when you have to pull it out of something like methane, natural gas, you're releasing CO2. So there has been an effort to really find cleaner sources. If we could get hydrogen without using a fossil fuel source. That would be great. So for several years, there has been a push to find other ways to get cleaner, less polluting hydrogen. One of the most popular and promising, it's called green hydrogen, and the name is what it sounds like, green in the sense of being very clean. In that case, you just need water, H2O, and some electricity to split it. So rather than steaming it from natural gas, you're pulling it from water, releasing no carbon whatsoever. And what you want to do also is get your electricity from a renewable power source, wind, solar, and in some cases, nuclear is also fine because there's no carbon pollution from nuclear power, so that would be acceptable. And that creates something called green hydrogen. Currently, there's very little green hydrogen available, though. This is something that's been moving out of the lab and is not yet scaled to industrial level. So most of the hydrogen is still very dirty. And I'll just toss in one more, since we're talking colors. The dirty form is often called gray. Then you have green, which is the good one. There's one called blue. To make blue hydrogen, you start with traditional industrial hydrogen, pull it out of natural gas. But in this case, you do not allow the carbon dioxide to escape. You capture it and you store it preferably underground. And a lot of oil companies are saying we can do this. That would qualify by some counts as a clean form of hydrogen. However, there is some controversy as to whether that's truly the best environmental option.
So we've got green is good, gray is bad, blue is somewhere in the middle?
That's right. You got it.
Good. So what are the main factors then that make hydrogen fuel so much more expensive than natural gas?
Well, yeah. So currently, if you're using it for, say, trucks or buses, the supply of hydrogen is very different than natural gas. Natural gas is extremely abundant. We have it all over the place. You can make it from waste. You can drill it from the ground. It's everywhere. It's very cheap, especially in the United States. To get that hydrogen, you now have to add in another layer, an industrial process, to split it from the natural gas. That requires energy and extra equipment. So then that's adding cost. For the story that I reported, I talked to a transit operator here in suburban Los Angeles, Foothill Transit, and they currently have about 36 hydrogen-powered buses in their fleet. Zero tailpipe pollution, which is a big thing in California. The buses run great, not a problem, but the operator pointed out our issue is the fuel for these things is 2.5 times our cost for natural gas. The other reason for that is hydrogen is not a commodity product traded like a commodity. There's no daily, there's no barrel of hydrogen price today, like there is for oil or gas. These things are fixed markets and with massive supply base. Hydrogen is very specific. If you're a big oil company, you probably make your own. If you're a big chemical company, you make your own, or you buy it from a large supplier like a company like Air Products, for example. But there's no open market for hydrogen. So if you want to run your buses on hydrogen or your truck fleet on hydrogen, first you have to find a supplier and then negotiate a price. So for that reason, it creates the opportunity for it to become more expensive. And arguably, today it is more expensive than just using natural gas or oil.
As we know, Democrats and the Biden administration in particular ran on climate change, ran on preserving the environment. So I am curious, what are the Biden administration's goals for carbon production and usage in the United States?
Well, the Biden administration is extremely aggressive in promoting hydrogen. And I will say this is something that I've covered for maybe 20 years. There is no precedent for the level of federal support under the Biden administration that we're seeing now. Some years ago, the Obama administration was a little, not interested. They thought for transportation and for clean energy, we're more interested in wind, solar, and maybe batteries for electric cars. The Biden administration has been more comprehensive, I guess, where they're looking at more options. And to be fair, the technology has moved over the last decade. So things that weren't really possible a decade ago now are. And primarily, that is a technology called electrolyzers. electrolyzers are what make the green hydrogen. They do the work to split water to make oxygen and hydrogen. That technology was not quite as far along a decade ago, and there are many companies that are saying that they're very close to having a low-cost, effective electrolyzer system to make all of this green hydrogen. So the Biden administration has been very generous. Both the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill have programs related to the use of hydrogen, the production of hydrogen. The $7 billion were handed out last year for these hydrogen hubs, these big projects involving both public dollars, private dollars, to really, try to be a moonshot to gin up this industry, to make cleaner hydrogen more widely available, to make it, cheaper. And so the administration's been very, very active in trying to do this. Right now, there's one more piece to that strategy, and this is where things are getting complicated. There is a federal tax credit for the production of clean hydrogen. It goes by the name 45V, it's IRS designation. But what that would do is provide $3 for every kilogram of clean hydrogen produced. So if you are a company that wants to make green hydrogen, which might cost, let's say, $4 a kilogram, if you have that $3 a kilogram incentive, suddenly you're now cost competitive with other forms of energy at that price. And so that is the purpose of the federal incentive program. It's to really get this market off the ground. It would be around for a decade, and the estimate is within a decade, the credit wouldn't be needed anymore, that this industry will really have matured and can stand on its own. But there's a big fight over who will get this credit, because not all hydrogen is considered clean enough. And at the moment, to be green is good, but to be green, you have to get all of your power from renewable energy. You can't just plug into the grid. You have to get it from new installations of wind or solar or nuclear. That is making some companies a little angry, because they feel that's going to be too difficult for them in the early days to find all of this new, widely available wind and solar. And companies that want to do blue, like ExxonMobil, for example, they don't like it at all, because at the moment it doesn't look like their blue hydrogen would qualify for the tax credit. And they're threatening to actually halt construction on a multi-billion-dollar blue hydrogen project in Texas as a result.
So only as of now, green would get the tax credit, green hydrogen. But would you consider green hydrogen, as we sit here right now, kind of a pipe dream? Because earlier you said it hasn't been made to scale yet. Is it too expensive? Is it too impossible to mass produce with the current technology today?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, since I'm not a scientist. But based on the number of companies that I'm speaking with, there are a great many that have aggressive programs, and they certainly believe it will be. They will tell you it's not going to be price competitive today. It's going to take some time to scale up. So that federal tax credit will be very helpful. The same thing happened 20 years ago with solar panels. Solar panels were far more expensive years ago. They also received a very generous tax credit. That tax credit did its job. Solar panels now cost much less than they used to manufacture. So new technologies, they do take time. So that's sort of where we are right now. Think of where we are with green hydrogen as sort of solar power 20 or 25 years ago, where it was not cost competitive at that time with natural gas or coal or other things, and now it is. And so there are companies that are very optimistic that they can bring down that cost curve. But I think realistically, they're saying, it's the end of this decade, it's the 2030s where maybe we can hit cost parity. So to say it's a pipe dream probably wouldn't be accurate, but it's not going to be simple. It is going to be very difficult to get that cost out, to make it cost competitive. And, it's hard to predict how these things are going to turn out. A lot of money has been poured into this, and some companies have made some big bets, but we don't know for sure, can they really pull it off? We'll see.
Let's talk about those tax credits, 45V. Can you talk about who the critics are and what their criticisms are of the current system?
Right. Well, so last December, the IRS and the Treasury Department, which will determine who gets the credit, working with the EPA, They said, okay, to qualify for the full credit, you only hydrogen that is made entirely with non-carbon power sources will qualify for this credit. Also, we want you to get your energy, your electricity, from new power sources. So you're not taxing the grid, because the grid's already, there are a lot of demands for power. A green hydrogen plant would need 100 megawatts or more of power. That's a lot of additional electricity. So the government is saying, look, to get the credit, get your power not only from renewable sources, but also new ones and additional ones. Now, some companies that already are making green hydrogen, like Plug Power, they just opened a plant in Georgia. They don't like that requirement at the moment because they hadn't baked that into their business model. They really wanted to just tap into the grid. Their new green hydrogen plant in Georgia that just opened will qualify because the power comes from a brand new nuclear power plant that just opened in Georgia. So that one's fine. But they have other facilities where they had not baked in new renewable power as their power source. A competitor of theirs, a company called Electric Hydrogen, their business model is entirely what the government would like to see, where every project they're planning would be powered by brand new renewable energy. So a new wind farm, a new solar array. They don't want to be connected to the grid at all. And that's kind of the model for what the government wants to see with these projects. So that's really where it stands right now, where we just had a public comment period from all the companies that concluded at the end of March, where they were able to say what they liked or did not like about the tax credit proposal. So the two camps are sort of split right now, and we're waiting to see later this year what the final version of the rules are to get this credit, because the credit's a big deal. It will, help a lot of these companies suddenly get into the market and sort of artificially be competitive in the early years. But we don't know the final version of the regulations yet, so that remains to be seen. But that is a challenge for some of the companies, for sure.
Alan, to put it in the simplest terms that you did earlier, gray hydrogen is bad, green hydrogen is good, blue hydrogen is somewhere in the middle. So why is the Biden administration not rewarding at least somewhat the companies using blue hydrogen? Because it does sound like that's a step in the right direction, at least.
Well, and that is exactly what the argument is for the companies that are pushing blue hydrogen. And actually, some of the other green hydrogen companies say, look, the rules initially should be a little looser because this is an industry in its infancy. And we want to let it walk first before we put too many restrictions on it. Well, the argument against it, there's some scientific studies that have been done, a famous one out of Cornell that said actually blue hydrogen is worse for the environment than traditional gray hydrogen, because the problem is to capture that carbon and store it underground is very energy intensive, which means, let's say you're making your hydrogen from natural gas. You make your hydrogen, now you capture the CO2 using more natural gas as your power source to capture it. And natural gas pipelines, for example, leak. Methane is a greenhouse gas. So the calculations are, if you're capturing the CO2, which can be done, you're also releasing more greenhouse gases from the natural gas that you're using. And at the end of the day, you'd be better off not trying to capture that CO2 at all, because you're not accomplishing anything that's good for the environment. Now, that's what one particularly well-known study found. I believe ExxonMobil would disagree with that. I don't think they share that view, but that's sort of where we stand. There is certainly an argument from some sectors that let's incentivize everyone to do better. Not everyone can get an A+ on the first day. Let's gradually increase the standards, and perhaps that's what will happen in the final version of the tax credit. I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not clear yet which way it's going to go.
As you noted, this industry is in its infancy stages. It's also very expensive as of right now. So what are some solutions that industry insiders are proposing that help lower costs and get production off the ground?
Well, I think probably the one that perhaps Plug Power would promote, and Plug has probably been at this about the longest of many of the companies that are in the green hydrogen space. They would say, let's at least back off a little bit on the requirement for all of this new renewable power as our only power source that we're allowed to use. Let us tap into the grid. That will allow us to begin producing the stuff. We'll get better week by week, month by month. We'll improve our efficiencies. Let us do that. Over time, we'll find additional power sources, but let's not phase in from day one some of these additional requirements on the renewable power component. So that would be an argument I think you would hear from some sides. And then, of course, the ExxonMobils of the world would say, look, blue hydrogen is cleaner hydrogen. Let's do that. I don't know if the rules will go that far. I suspect there might be more of a grandfathering in on the energy requirement piece here, saying, okay, you can use a mix of renewable and some regular grid power for the first couple of years, 2 or 3 years, to let them start to scale up. That would certainly help because if you've made your business plan without factoring in this need for additional new sources of renewable power, if you have to add them, that's cost right there. So you're going to take an expensive process and make it even costlier. So perhaps what we'll see is something more like that, a phased-in system in terms of where your clean power comes from.
What markets do people within the industry believe could be good for the early adoption of clean hydrogen?
A lot. There's great interest for things like steel and sustainable aviation fuel. Europe in particular, because the United States is not alone in pushing for this. Europe is also very aggressively trying to scale up its own clean hydrogen industry. This was really actually triggered by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the limits on getting natural gas from Russia and the risk to the EU. So they wanted to prioritize more domestic clean energy forms. So green hydrogen has been heavily pushed in the EU. And they also are going to be requiring steel manufacturing that you use hydrogen, clean hydrogen in steel manufacturing, because steel making is very, very dirty. There's a lot of pollution, a lot of greenhouse gases that come from that. Ammonia production. Ammonia is used in fertilizers. So for modern agriculture, we use a lot of ammonia. That's made with hydrogen. And so green hydrogen is seen as a source of, as an ingredient for the ammonia market globally. And then there is interest in transportation, mostly for heavy trucks. There are some companies now that are already beginning to deliver hydrogen-powered semi-trucks. More are coming. And for long-haul trucking in particular, hydrogen seems to work a little bit better than batteries. And so it's a little more practical. So that's another area. And then again, sustainable aviation fuel, cleaner jet fuel, where you're blending it in with blending in green hydrogen to make cleaner types of aviation fuel. That's a new market that already Europe is, again, requiring, and the US is moving to also require airlines to use ever greater amounts of sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF. And green hydrogen would be a component of that as well, potentially.
Alan, you're a resident climate technology expert here, so I am curious, what are you looking out for next when it comes to the hype surrounding green hydrogen?
Well, I think a company to watch will be Electric Hydrogen. I think their approach is very interesting. It's created by two guys that came out of the solar power industry, so they're very familiar with both renewable power and working with utilities and with industrial customers. And I think their approach will be one to watch. If they can succeed, they already have built in some early clients for their product. And they basically have a green hydrogen plant in a box that they'll set up for you and then plug it into a wind farm, for example. If they can continue to land projects and have some success over the next 2 to 3 years, I think that will be very promising. So I think that's one company to watch for sure. I will be very interested also to see in the transportation space
the adoption of hydrogen for trucking. Because one of the things I look at a lot is battery-powered vehicles as well as hydrogen. Batteries work great for electric cars and for, say, medium-duty delivery vehicles. But if you're hauling 60,000 pounds of goods, 500, 600, 700 miles, batteries get a little difficult to work with. That's a lot of battery. And so that's an area also where hydrogen looks really interesting. Certainly many companies like Daimler and Volvo and Toyota and Hyundai, as well as startups like Nikola, all think that's going to be a business. So I think that's definitely an area I'm looking at as well.
Alan, thank you so much for your insights and your reporting. I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Behind every great story of business success, there is one person, one supporter, mentor, investor, even customer, without whom that success story might not exist. Bill Gates has Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett had legendary investor Benjamin Graham. And Shiv Bhakta has Chris Harris. Shiv grew up in Texas, surrounded by energy companies. When he was hired by ExxonMobil right out of college, it was the first time anyone in his family had held a white-collar job. His parents, immigrants from India, hadn't gone to college and instead built their lives in America as entrepreneurs. Shiv was thrilled to work at Exxon, but soon realized he was not keeping up with his peers. That's when Chris entered his life and completely shifted the trajectory of Shiv's entire career. Shiv Bhakta, co-founder and CEO of Active Surfaces. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
You were on the 2024 Forbes 30 Under 30 list, but you didn't start your career there. And we're here talking about career journeys for the one who changed everything. And so I want to ask you, who is the person who changed everything for you, without whom you would not be sitting in that seat?
It's funny because a lot of people come to mind. My fiance, the team that we've built, the investors that are supporting us. And without them, this company and I wouldn't be where I am today. But I think the person that comes to mind at the very early part of my journey was my second boss, Chris Harris.
He was your second boss, so he's not the person who hired you, correct?
He was not the person that hired me.
Tell me, how did you get in contact? How did he become your boss? What do you remember about that time?
Yeah, so right after undergrad, I got my first white-collar job, and not just mine, my entire family's first white-collar job, because my mom and dad moved here from India in the 90s. And they were first-generation immigrants. So they didn't go to college. My dad didn't finish high school. They were small and medium-sized business owners my entire childhood. So I grew up on the weekends and the evenings helping them. But then I remember being super jazzed and then not performing to the level I thought I could perform at, despite spending hours and hours more than my peers. And thinking, man, I'm spending all this energy. I'm really passionate about this work. I love energy. How come it's not materializing into something that's meaningful for both me and then my performance? And then Chris came along a year into my job, and he was transitioning from another job in Europe for ExxonMobil, and that was he was running multi-million-dollar capital projects. He came in with his family, and he became the supervisor because my old supervisor shifted roles, and that's when I think my career really took a different trajectory.
What was the job you were doing when he took over your team?
I was a cost engineer, so I was helping folks in the refinery figure out how much of this capital project costs, if you want to change a pump or increase some piping or change a tank.
And you felt like you were not succeeding. Chris comes in, becomes your boss, and what does he do? What are the conversations you start having with each other?
Yeah, Chris is really great at making sure that he's identifying the potential in folks, and especially in folks that are often overlooked. And I remember thinking, Chris is a great guy. He's a family man. He has 2 daughters, spent a lot of time with them. He's a fitness nut. He's super health conscious. And I'm thinking, man, this guy is not only really focused in his personal life and really spending time with his family, but also excelling at work. And I think most importantly, he truly values people and he unlocks their ability to achieve their full potential. Maybe the key lesson that I took away from that was, it's not that people are winners and losers, but that it's a manager's job to bring out the best in someone so they can be a winner. And I remember feeling like a loser that then became a winner in the company just because of his support and his direction.
he saw the potential in you and he gave you guidance and you were able to make changes to what you were doing?
Yeah, so specifically, I remember I was a cost engineer, so I was working with different folks around the refinery to figure out project costs. And I think the skill sets that I had weren't perfectly meshed with that. So what he did was a couple of things. One is he helped me find and craft a new position, which is a big risk. Like he essentially lobbied for a new position to be created in his team that has never happened before and said, I think this position is needed in the company, and I think Shiv is the guy to do it. And it was called a benchmarking analyst, where you work with project teams all over the world to say, should this project cost this much money? And this required data analytics, it required a lot of collaboration, it required a hustle to work with folks all over the globe. And he saw that maybe my strengths were communication, it was collaborating cross-culturally, it was focusing on analytics and data-driven decisions.
Wow, that's a special manager, someone who sees the skills and then literally crafts a new role. What's your sense of how rare or common that is in the corporate world?
It's very rare. I've had a few managers before and after, and all of them are great humans, but I think being able to take someone and help unlock what they're fully capable of is unique.
So he helps turn around your performance and I imagine your confidence. What happens next after you go from feeling like a loser to one who's succeeding?
It was the best position I've ever had before starting active services. But I still remember feeling that maybe Exxon wasn't my end goal. I mean, I grew up in Houston, so energy was in my blood. So I remember working at BP, working for EPC, the firm that designed refineries, and energy was like all I knew. But Exxon was very slow to change. And I remember thinking maybe there is a bigger role I can play in helping mitigate the biggest crisis of our time, which is climate change. So I left, went to the US Department of Energy, worked in nuclear security for a while on nuclear energy. And then I went to a technology transfer office in the DOE, supporting national labs, commercializing technology. And all of that is what led me to MIT, and then ultimately starting this company.
MIT to go to Sloan, where you met your now business partner. Tell us about that.
When I first came to MIT, I had no idea how I wanted to make a dent in climate change. I just knew that was the North Star. It could be in a variety of different ways. And there's most people working in this are great people that just want to play their small part. But I was fortunate enough to attend a class called Climate and Energy Ventures, where they pair PhDs with innovative technologies with MBA that are willing to hustle and make a difference. We met the very first day of class and he brought his technology. He demonstrated it right after I was pitching my own idea for a company. But he fully convinced me that he was the guy to work on it. So I jumped right on.
And tell us, what does Active Surfaces do?
Active Surfaces is an MIT spin-out that creates lightweight, flexible solar panels that can be seamlessly integrated into the built environment. Imagine like a solar yoga mat that's cheaper to install, way lighter, and can be stuck onto any surface, enabling more power for more people.
More power for more people. So when I hear solar panel, I think of the big panels on people's roofs, or sometimes if you pass a field, it's in the rows and they're kind of standing up. I understand you have a sample, a smaller sample. Can you show me what you brought?
I do have samples. So most of the solar modules that we know today are based off of silicon solar cells. These are then connected into an array, into a module itself. There are 72 or 96 of these. And then these are encased in glass and stuck onto buildings. You can imagine that being very heavy, because that's a lot of glass, 1 meter by 2 meters. And the form factor is very rigid. So it doesn't adapt to the shape of the building or to other unique circumstances around the area. This is also very fragile. If you bend it too much, it shatters into 1 million pieces. This is why people way smarter than me, like my co-founder, Dr. Swartout, and the researchers at MIT, have developed something that's literally as lightweight as a feather. It's 100 times lighter. It could be rolled up and unrolled like a solar yoga mat. And it could be in a variety of form factors. Think fabric, plastics, and glass. It can do it all.
Fabrics, plastics, glass. So what are all the applications? Where are you starting?
This is just the beginning. So we say solar yoga mat because we think that's the most interesting go-to-market. It needs to be somewhere where we can produce a ton of this and then go down the cost curve. So we're starting with low-load buildings. Think buildings where you can't structurally handle the weight of solar. So you roll this up and then just unroll it with a fraction of the weight, so you don't have to structurally upgrade the building. But that's just the beginning. Then after that, you could laminate this onto a variety of materials. So imagine prefabricated solar facades. Imagine this being in space. Imagine this on the tops of cars. The possibilities are endless if you could stick a flexible, lightweight solar panel with the same performance on anything.
So we're currently in an era of electric vehicles. Are we moving into an era of solar vehicles if those are going to be on the roofs of cars?
I definitely hope so. I think this has the ability to extend the range of EVs fairly significantly.
We're dreaming right now. Let's bring us back to reality. So you meet your co-founder in this class and you start growing the company. What are those first few steps? Because it sounds sci-fi, but you obviously have product samples.
The entire point of this class that we were in together was to craft a business model that makes sense. Who are the customers? How do you manufacture this? How much money do you need? So over the span of that semester, we did customer interviews. We built like a reasonable go-to-market strategy. And then I remember a month into the class, we chatted and I was like, hey, Rich, there is a pitch competition at Harvard that you should go pitch at. You should take this technology. I think you have a good shot. And his response to me was, why don't you pitch? And I was like, oh, I know nothing about this. I'm just a random MBA that's just learning about your technology. But if you like, I'm down to help if you would like to help. And then he took the faith and like to work with me, to believe in me. We went to the competition in like October of that year. The panelists were all VCs. Some of them are notable billionaires, and we ended up winning first. And that was the first time that I remember thinking, man, this truly has potential. People believe in it. The go-to-market seemed reasonable. Let's see how far we can take this.
As you're describing the pitch competition, I'm hearing some of those skills that Chris brought out in you or identified in you. Communication, cross cultures, I think in this case, translating climate tech for an investor audience. Were you thinking about him or thinking about your early days at Exxon as you were in this pitch competition?
Definitely. It's interesting because like the lessons you said, which is finding the talents of people, is kind of what led me to Rich and is what's helping me build the team that we have now. In that pitch competition, communication and clearly articulating a vision was super important. But so was also being able to effectively work with Rich and being able to see what his skills were, what my skills were, allocate accordingly. The number one reason startups fail is because founders have tension. And you need to be able to effectively work with someone that has different viewpoints, comes from a different background, and you need to be able to bring the best out of your teammate. And I think that is true not just from manager to employee, but also from peer to peer.
What year was that pitch competition?
2022.
2022. And then what happened after that?
What happened after that? Rich went on a honeymoon with his wife the same week, that December, where we had another pitch competition at the MIT 100K. I ended up winning first with the support of some of my classmates. And then it was a myriad of pitches. We won the full MIT 100K. We went to Singapore and won some pitch money. And then the company grew from just me and him going around pitching, building trust, getting VC traction to what it is now.
And then over the course of all these pitches in 2023, you draw the attention of Forbes editors and make the 2024 Forbes 30 under 30 list. And I understand after making the list, within 3 months, you got some funding. Tell us about this.
We did. That was exciting. This is a very difficult time to be raising money. Right after winning these pitch competitions, we were thinking, man, people believe in us. The market seems to have a true pain point that we can help identify. And if this was at global scale, we can make a real dent on climate change. So having all that conviction, we went out to VCs to raise money. At first, it was kind of difficult just because of the interest rate environment, because people are very tight with their purses right now. But then we got a lot of good validation. I mentioned the pitch competition, but also the Forbes. We then soon after closed $5.5 million, which was the first money into the company. And it was just me and Rich at that time. And now we're using that money to scale our operations, build a team of high impact, highly focused engineers and business development folks, and then getting manufacturing equipment and producing some of these Generation Zero scale.
What is Generation Zero in layman's terms? And I'm asking because I imagine someone watching this who might have a factory or a house with maybe an unconventional roof, they might want something like that right now. Can they get it?
They can definitely work with us. If you have that problem, definitely talk to us. We are going to start with innovative partners. There's a climate tech incubator in Boston called Greentown Labs that we're going to start collaborating with. And then once it's proven in a sandbox environment, so some field testing is done, we get the data to prove that it's safe and that's reliable, we're going to go and work with increasingly complex corporate partners. So this could be outside, like on buildings in the matter of a year or two.
Have you and Chris stayed in touch? Does he know he's the one who changed everything for you?
I was talking to my fiance about this last night, and I don't know if I've been as clear to Chris about how impactful he's been since we last stayed in touch.
You said that you're thinking about his lessons as you're hiring. Talk a little bit more about that. What are you looking for in people, and have you had to pivot one of your employees to a different role based on capability alignment?
The thing that he said once still resonates with me is that talent is universally distributed, but opportunity is not. And there are a lot of talented people that want to make a dent on climate change, that are interested in working with with Active Services, which is fantastic, and I love to see that. But we want to make sure that we're picking not just the winners, like he didn't get to pick me to be on his team, but we're picking the people that are excited and we can best fit into the team and can best leverage to their full potential. And that's a lesson I've been taking. Our team grew from 2 to 8, and we are really focused on making sure that people feel compelled in their role, they feel like they have the support that they need. And the framework that Chris always used for me was clarity and competence. So we're making sure that every employee has a clear understanding of what they need to do to help the company succeed, and they have the skills they need to do that. And if they don't, we're helping them with training, helping them with redirecting their position, helping them with clarifying what objective needs to happen. A lot of that is just understanding where the human is coming from.
Where do you think you'd be had you not met Chris? Had he not become your manager at Exxon?
I would probably still be, I was in a refinery in Louisiana at the time. So I would probably still be at ExxonMobil working as an engineer, like in the refinery, which would be exciting. I'm sure I would have loved it, but I would not be at MIT. I would not be on the Forbes list. I would not be founding a startup. I would not be making the same dent I am to climate change.
Interesting. So he identified your communication abilities and your capabilities as a worker, but what you just said was all about your entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. How do you connect those dots?
I think it's the confidence and the ability to know that, like, I could do more than what I was currently doing. The creativity I think he took to create a new job for me is something that's never happened before. And maybe if he could do that and make a new position where I can thrive in, then maybe I could make a bet on myself and go to the DOE. And maybe I can make a bet on myself and go and even consider applying to MIT. And then maybe even get accepted, maybe even found a startup, maybe even be on the Forbes list. So I think it's that the seed of being willing to challenge something, create something new, and actually have conviction behind it.
Interesting. So that one act of creating a new role for you opened up an entire career path. You also told me a story when we were on the phone the other week about Chris's traveling and how that inspired you. Can you talk a little bit about this? I know it's more fun than a day job, but I'm sure there are lessons there too.
No, of course. I remember the first time I met him, he had just came in from Europe and we were having a team lunch because he wanted to meet the team. And in the first couple minutes, he shared that him and his brother traveled the world for a year. And I remember thinking, this was a year out of undergrad, I was thinking, man, that sounds wonderful. I would love to quit and travel with my girlfriend then, she's now my fiance. And I remember thinking, man, I wonder if I can tell him that. Or am I gonna get in trouble for communicating this to a supervisor? But I was bold enough to ask. And he, instead of being like, no, like don't quit, we need you here, I need to hit my own internal KPIs, he was very supportive. And he said, wow, like, yeah, I'm glad to see that you have an interest in this. Let's figure out how we can make that happen. And that's partially what led to the role creation, because he had 9 months to work with.
Interesting. So you basically gave him a deadline. You had 9 months and he created this role. Where did you travel at the end of those 9 months?
It was intending to be a year. This was winter 2019. And then my girlfriend and I, our fiance now, started traveling around Southeast Asia. So we went to every country in the region: Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines. And we were country hopping. But then by like March, April, as you can imagine, in 2020, we were escaping lockdowns, traveling around.
As you describe those countries, and maybe you were just going for fun, I wonder though if you saw the need for active surfaces in those countries, or did you observe anything about energy needs while you were traveling?
Energy is always in the back of my brain. I remember thinking that there was a lot of rural villages where energy access and grid reliability was an issue. I remember thinking that, I remember seeing solar panels in rural areas at that time, which was fascinating, and thinking, wow, like it's here, but it's very limited in its capability because you can't actually put it on the roofs. You can only use a small piece of land. The costs are probably not cost effective for some of these applications. So at the time, I was seeing distributed energy play an impact, and I was benefiting from it, having visited some of those areas.
Take me 1 year into Active Surface's future. If we were to speak a year from now, what would you want to report to us?
That we've made some of these using our new manufacturing equipment, and we put them outside. They're demonstrated, it works. We've hit our technical and business development milestones in-house. Our team has increased to 10 to 12, and they're all hyper-focused, and they love working with us. I think that is going to be the catalyst that separates a good startup from a great startup, is how quickly can you empower and build a highly motivated team. So hopefully in a year, we have some stuff outside, and the team's really excited about it.
And of course, we're talking for the one who changed everything. What would you tell folks watching who feel like they have not found the one who changed everything for them?
I remember before I found Chris, I was feeling really down on myself. So if there's anyone watching and you're concerned that you may not be living up to your full potential, that you haven't found the true mentor to really guide you and give you that vision in your life, just know that it only takes one. There's a lot of really great humans in the world, and I'm sure the many folks you've interviewed have had different ones that have changed everything. So keep that eye out, keep believing in yourself, and I'm sure you'll find one that will give you the confidence you need to keep going and make a difference.
And since you're taking Chris's leadership model into mind as you lead Active Surfaces, what's your advice for folks who want to be the one for someone else?
Truly care about your people. Care about the people that are often overlooked. Care about the people from where they're genuinely coming from, and then see the best of them. Because again, I don't think people are good or bad, or people are winners or losers, or people are great at their job or bad at their job. I think people have potential, and it needs to be unlocked with the right structure, with the right clarity, with the right competence. And I think as a manager and as a leader, and as the one that changed everything for someone, it's our job to do that. And hopefully I could do that the same way Chris did it for me.
I hope for that as well. Shiv, thank you so much.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Erin Osman has built Sierra Nevada Corporation into the nation's largest female-owned defense contractor. Erin is also one of 400 billionaires on this year's Forbes 400, and my colleague Monica Hunter-Hart has an inside look at a $13 billion deal Erin just struck to build a nuclear-ready Doomsday plane. Hi everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath, editor of Forbes Women. Joining me now is my colleague, reporter Monica Hunter-Hart. Monica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
This is a fabulous story, and let's break it all down. Who is Erin Osman? How much is she worth? Where is she on the Forbes 400?
Yeah, okay, so Erin Osman, she's the 335th richest woman or richest person in the United States at the moment. She's worth $4 billion, and along with her husband, Fadi Osman, she runs Sierra Nevada Corporation, SNC, an aerospace defense contractor. She's got this really interesting story that I can go into a bit. She's basically a Turkish immigrant, so she was born in a really beautiful city called Izmir on the western coast of Turkey, grew up in the southeastern part of the country in Diyarbakir, moved to Ankara for school, and there she met Fatih, her future husband, who was actually, kind of fun fact, a national cycling champion for the country.
Okay.
I know. Kind of wild. And then they, just met briefly there. They both immigrated separately to the United States, and reconnected in California. Fatih basically convinced her to get a business degree at the University of Nevada at Reno. They went there together as grad students, bonded really strongly, and became best friends, she says, and then eventually dated. After graduation, Fatih got a job as an intern there at SNC, kind of moved up the ranks, became an engineer. And Erin joined the company a bit later. She was a financial consultant. And yeah, they actually kind of went through a rough period there with the company. They basically watched it struggle from kind of contract to contract. It was really struggling financially. Erin automated all of their financials, their financial systems, and was giving them advice, but wasn't really able to, didn't have enough control to kind of get them to a financially stable place. So they were just struggling along for many years. And eventually the couple decided that they were kind of just sick of watching that and not really having the power to do much more about it. So they actually bought the company. They borrowed against their home to buy the company in 1994, for less than $5 million. Today, SNC is worth, per our estimates, $4 billion. So wild growth there. Together they own 87% of the company. Erin owns 51% of that stake. Fatih owns 49%. It's the largest female-owned defense contractor in the country. And they also own a couple of other companies as well, affiliates. They own Sierra Space, a space technologies company, which has a really cool project called the Dream Chaser space plane. We probably don't have time to get into that today, but you should look it up. And then DAG, Deutsche Aircraft Group, a German aircraft manufacturer.
They have Dreamcatcher, but...
Dream Chaser, yeah.
Sorry, Dream Chaser. I was going to make a play on words because you have been talking to them recently about a deal for Doomsday planes. A little bit,
a little darker name,
conceptually, a little darker.
Yeah, actually,
but it's a $13 billion contract that she secured, and you kind of have an inside look at what happened here. So let's just start at the top.
Yeah.
What is this deal? Why is it significant?
Yeah. So, okay. So it's called the SAOC contract, the Survivable Airborne Operations Center. So you're basically building or developing the next Doomsday plane, they often call it, yes, as you mentioned, for the Air Force, often also called the Night Watch plane. And these are colloquial terms, by the way. This is not, what the Air Force calls them. It's the current model of this plane is the E-4B. That's the official name.
Okay. What makes these planes special, by the way? Why are they called Doomsday planes?
Yeah, so, they're meant to protect you against a doomsday scenario. By you, that basically means, in the event of a nuclear attack or some other kind of national emergency, it would enable survivable communications between the president, the Secretary of Defense, and the armed forces. It's equipped with over 40 communication systems. It's hardened against radiation, against the electromagnetic pulse that would, in the event of a nuclear attack, short circuit electronics within range. There's nothing you can really do to protect a plane against the kind of if you're in the fireball of the nuke, but in most other scenarios, it's meant to enable this plane to keep running. And so if you kind of imagine, let's say President Vladimir Putin were to launch a surprise attack, a surprise nuclear attack against the United States, by some estimates, a nuke could hit the Capitol in 6 to 8 minutes. We currently have 4 of these Doomsday planes, and they can be airborne within just a few minutes' notice.
I see.
There's always one on alert. And then I think the other important part about this particular contract is that they're not building a plane from scratch. So they're actually retrofitting, remodeling a used Boeing 747-8I plane.
Okay.
And this is a really cool plane, a kind of iconic plane, actually. So the 747, when it was kind of unveiled to the public in the mid-20th century, was so big it was known as the kind of jumbo jet, the queen of the skies. And if you, for example, did a transatlantic flight, in the maybe late 20th century, early 21st century, on a big plane, 500 plus people, there's a great chance that you were on one of these things. It had 4 engines. Which is not so good for current airline travel because you can use a much cheaper kind of twin engine jet now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's great for a wartime scenario because it provides extra redundancy. So if one of the engines is blown out, you have more.
Right.
So they're actually being retired from passenger use at the moment. So there are only about 50 left. But if you'll allow me, Maggie, just a kind of quick example, let's say you took one of these transatlantic flights at some point, and then let's say that, you experienced a nuclear attack. What you would have experienced is basically, radiation getting sucked into the cabin, you're breathing it in, you're not in good shape, and then that immediately frying the plane's electronics and basically careening the plane to the ground. So horrific scenario. That's the baseline that SNC is starting from here, which is just kind of wild to think about. They're taking that plane and they need to basically make that plane more or less nuclear proof.
So basically the government says we have 4 of these Doomsday planes, but we want to retrofit these Boeing machines, these Boeing aircrafts into Doomsday planes so we have more. Right? Is it adding to the fleet?
So the current planes are also Boeing planes, but it's going to be taking actually much newer planes that were probably made, we don't know exactly which ones they are, but they were some of the last 747s ever made, and retrofitting those commercial aircraft. Taking them out, the current ones they just bought them from Korea Airlines, so they're currently being used right now to carry passengers back and forth from places like Seoul to Atlanta, taking those and then retrofitting those much newer planes.
So the government says we want to retrofit these planes, we're opening bids for a contract, so it's not a done deal that Aaron Osman's SNC wins this bid, right? So they're going up against competition, I imagine.
Right.
Who was their competition in winning this $13 billion deal?
Yeah, it was Boeing. They were the only other company to bid on this, and they were kind of considered shoo-ins for the contract for many reasons, in part because Boeing, the original planes, the existing Doomsday planes, they're Boeing planes. Boeing created these in the 70s. It's been maintaining them ever since. Boeing is currently making about $150 million per year maintaining these. Also, Boeing is it's an experienced contractor in this space. It's the largest, most successful aerospace company in the world. It's maybe $78 billion in sales last year. S&C comparatively is $2 billion. Imagine it just won this $13 billion contract. I mean, it's such an escalation. So Boeing has way more experience in that sense of doing projects at this scale. It's also currently doing something very similar with Air Force One, the U.S. presidential aircraft. It's also taking 747s and retrofitting used commercial aircraft, or use those used commercial aircraft to create the next generation of Air Force One. That project is not going so well for Boeing, at least in some senses. It is actually losing $2 billion so far and counting on those. So that could be one potential reason of many that we can get into about why Boeing was not ultimately chosen for this.
Interesting. But ultimately what you have here with $78 billion in revenue versus $2 billion in revenue, Boeing and SNC respectively, is a little bit of a David and Goliath situation. So Aaron Osman is really facing a giant, and she wins this contract. What did she do? What did she say to help her be successful here?
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's important to say that it's not like SNC is coming out of nowhere. I mean, they are still a large company, and they have been successful for many years, but they were really in this kind of mid-tier of defense contractors is the kind of way that the industry describes this. Boeing's kind of a tier one company. So in terms of what they did, there are a few points maybe we can get into. One, I guess, is that Boeing basically submitted a bid for this contract that was non-compliant, at least according to my reporting. That's what people are telling me, which means that the Air Force basically put forth some really tough terms. I'm hearing over and over the Air Force is a really tough customer. So they ask for, not the impossible, but they ask for things that are really difficult to pull off. In this case, there were two things that Boeing was basically not willing to agree to, and SNC was willing to agree to. One is the kind of relinquishing of an intellectual property rights. So Boeing owns the original design data for the existing Doomsday planes because it made them, and it did not give that data to the government. So it has basically been able to compel the government to continue to hire them for this maintenance work that I mentioned earlier. Again, like $150 million a year at this point. That's very common in this sector. For people to kind of cling to their IP because it can be this really lucrative revenue source for them. And it leads to something called vendor lock, which often it also leads to a really highly consolidated defense sector, which has been really criticized. There are lots of antitrust concerns about, a lack of competition, maybe overly inflated contract prices, which, the kind of burden of that is then passed down to the taxpayer. So Boeing wanted to do the same thing here. They wanted to hold on to the IP. SNC said, we are okay with not doing that. We would prefer that the government come back to us and hire us again to do that maintenance work because they want to voluntarily. They think that we did such a good job that they choose us,
Right.
So that's one. There's also a fixed price component to this contract. A fixed price structure basically means that, there's a pre-agreed upon cost for how much, it is thought to, how much this contract is presumed to cost. And then if it goes, if there are price overruns, basically the contractor needs to assume all of the extra costs. So not ideal, obviously, for a contractor. That is the exact kind of pricing structure that Boeing agreed to for Air Force One. That's one of the big reasons it's been losing billions. Boeing said last year, we are not doing that again. It's also, had a similar issue with many other contracts. And so it's way more than $2 billion that they've lost altogether. They have said, we are not doing any more fixed price contracts. We're taking a step back. That is simply too much. SNC, on the other hand, said, we are willing to do that. It's also important to say that that's not such a big part of the pricing structure of this contract. It is a minority portion. So the details of the contract are highly classified. We don't know a lot about them. I have a FOIA request out. I'm hoping to get more details, but right now all we really know is it's a minority of the contract. It's probably just it is certainly just for the production stage. So that's much better than fixed price all the way through, like the contract for Air Force One, especially because that initial kind of development stage is very uncertain. You go into a plane, you're designing something for the first time, you don't know what it's going to involve or how much it's going to cost, really. So it's a small fixed price portion, but it's still, that involves some risk.
Right.
So Boeing didn't want to take that on. One small last thing there is just that SNC does have decades of experience doing, modifying existing aircraft, integrating existing aircraft with new technologies. So that is what they're doing here. In some ways, they're a really great fit for this project. In many ways, they're a really great fit for this project. And they kind of doubly proved their capability to the Air Force by pulling bold maneuvers like, when they decided to bid for this, they went out and they went to the Air Force's backyard in Dayton, Ohio, and they basically, at the airport there, very close to the Air Force base there, built a conspicuously 747-sized hangar there, within which they would be doing this work, theoretically. So even before they won the contract, they built a hangar that was big enough to hold a 747 that they didn't have before, and then went to the Air Force and said, see, we are so prepared. We can start pretty much immediately. We are so ready for this. You should just let us do it.
That's like dressing for a party and then running into the party host at the grocery store. And
oh my God.
Oh, you're hosting a party? I'm so ready.
It's exactly like that.
A very layperson's analogy, right? But
yeah.
They were basically saying, we're ready. We can do this.
Yeah.
And that was Erin's idea. I'm interested in her leadership here because it does feel like there were certain structural and environmental benefits she had, right?
Yeah.
There are innovations that SNC has developed.
Yeah.
She showed she was ready. Meanwhile, you have Boeing, which has had, to put it mildly, some PR problems this year.
Yes.
And its own struggles. What's the balance, do you think, between Boeing having difficulties and Erin Osman having the right ideas in getting this contract? Is it more of the positive or is it more of the negative?
I mean, I do think it's both. It's hard for me to say. I do think that the issues that Boeing has had this year, maybe most infamously with the 737 MAX door plug flying off of the Alaska Airline flight, coming out of Portland in January. Although that actually happened after they were eliminated from this competition, but they've been having 737 problems for a long time, and CEOs leaving, et cetera. They're not in a good place at the moment. Surely that had an impact here. But I don't want to overstate that too much. I also think SNC has been, kind of coming up in the world for a long time. I think the idea of building this hangar was a pretty brilliant one. They've also spent $175 million so far. They're planning on spending much more and kind of upgrading their digital infrastructure. They have some really cool ideas about what they're going to do in building and developing this plane, and we can maybe get into that a little bit. And I do think Erin, had a big role in that. She and Fatih they kind of split the duties of the company, so they can, we can put this at the feet of both of them, and of course the entirety of SNC. Fatih is a little bit more kind of strategy and growth focused. So I think he was actually the one who had the idea of, let's go for bigger projects than we've been going for in the past, and he kind of challenged the leadership of SNC to go bigger. That happened about 5 years ago, and then the team kind of realigned and started shooting for SAOC, this Doomsday contract. Erin is a little bit more of the kind of running the company in a more traditional sense. Maybe she oversees all governance. She is responsible for the financial stability of the company. So that's probably heartening to, she's a lot of, we talked about kind of the early history of SNC. She's really good at making sure that, they're solvent, they're in a really great financial place. And given that this is going to be such a kind of difficult contract with lots of technical and managerial challenges and financial difficulties, I think she's probably a great person to kind of be at the helm.
You mentioned some technological innovations, just real quick and possibly high level, because I'm sure you got really in the weeds, but what do you think are the biggest innovations that SNC brings to this project?
Yeah, so they're basically going to be coming in and creating a digital twin of the plane, which is something that is it's a kind of newish technology that's more common for kind of creating new planes, not as common for redeveloping planes. So SNC invested in this very early. They're going in, they're kind of scanning the plane, creating a series of digital models that are going to be stacked on top of each other, a digital twin. So they don't even think they're going to have to touch the plane for a long time, which will help kind of minimize contact with the kind of Boeing original design data, hopefully saving them money and effort. Once they've done that, then they kind of go back in and they create, or they kind of, so SNC refers to it as the equivalent of the studs out remodel of your home. So they're going down, they're stripping the plane down to the basics, kind of to the studs. They're creating an interface, kind of like the drywall. And then they're integrating it with a lot of systems that are coming from subcontractors, actually. So General Electric will be doing the engines, Lockheed Martin will be doing the refueling systems.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so they're kind of fundamentally a systems integrator here, actually. And then at the end, they will have the new home, and the blueprint for that will be the kind of data that they are relinquishing to the Air Force. Yeah.
So this is just the beginning of the contract. It's over 12 years, is that correct?
2036, so yeah.
Is success, we've talked about the innovations and the things that they're doing right, but is success guaranteed, and what does success look like for SNC? What does it do to their revenue? What does it do to their reputation?
Yeah, great question. I mean, if they don't lose money, that's pretty good. I think regardless, even if they don't lose money, even if they break even, an analyst, Lauren Thompson, who's a longtime aerospace analyst, put it to me this way, this heralds the emergence of a major new U.S. aerospace enterprise. Another analyst, Kai von Rumor, said, they're moving up in the food chain. So their reputation is already improved because of this. They're probably going to get many more contracts, especially if they prove that they are more than capable of doing this. They just won another very notable contract called Hades, developing long-range spy planes for the Army, that was in August, a few months after winning the original contract. So yeah, they're hoping to basically just ride that momentum, keep getting new exciting contracts, double their revenue to $2 billion by 2025, triple in size by 2030. They say that they're already on target to hit those goals. So even with the existing contracts they've already won, so that could even be potentially a conservative estimate. So it's a big deal.
What would failure look like, and what would that mean for SNC?
Yeah, maybe even harder to define. Many analysts told me, they don't think this will cause SNC to go bankrupt or to completely, fail. But it would definitely be painful if they end up losing a substantial amount of money on this. So there's a risk of, financial risk, and then there's also a kind of, this could go over schedule. And in the aerospace defense world, often projects do go over schedule, and they often are over budget. SNC is known for being very nimble, very quick, and good at those things. So, maybe that won't happen here. Hopefully it won't. But there is, to some degree, a risk. SNC will surely make it out on the other side, but it could be, to some degree, a reputational hit, or maybe slow their growth.
Obviously, aerospace and defense is a highly specialized space. There can be a lot of jargon. I think for the general public, you don't get a lot of exposure to it. So what was most interesting to you? What most excited you in reporting out this story?
Yeah. I think to me, it's interesting seeing the success, the kind of unlikely success of a mid-tier company coming up against, such a big entity like Boeing. I think that's exciting. It's really cool seeing this this woman who's an immigrant be so successful in the U.S. national defense space. And then I think it's just, even though I'm very new to kind of the aerospace defense world, learning about how consolidated it is at this point, the fact that SNC has been so successful here so far. It's a big deal. And there was an analyst named Cynthia Cook from CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, who put it very well. She said, competition increases performance across the entire industrial base. So the fact that SNC is going in there, proving that a smaller entity can have a shot. It might encourage other kind of mid-tier companies to throw their hat in the ring, potentially increasing competition across the entire sector, improving things for the taxpayer, for the government, for our national defense.
Interesting. So you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation some of the competitive concerns that people have, the antitrust argument. So this could be the start of a new generation in aerospace and defense, perhaps?
Exactly, yeah.
Interesting.
We'll see.
We'll see. Did you get to go in any planes? What was your on-the-ground reporting process like for this?
I did not go in any planes. I might have a chance to go on a Doomsday plane next year. I'm not even sure if I should say that. We'll see. But it's highly classified, so they don't really want people kind of poking their noses into it too much.
Well, for your sake, I hope you get a look at those planes. I'm
Thank you.
curious to get on the inside of those planes. I don't know if I'd want to go up in the sky in them, though it sounds pretty safe.
As safe as it can get, I guess, yeah.
Monica, thank you so much for joining us and sharing
Thank you,
your
Becky.
story. And I encourage everyone to find it and read it on Forbes.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was always very entrepreneurial. In high school, I used to buy these watches from Amazon and I'll resell them. And then when I got to college, that's when my motivation really took off of I'm capable of anything I put my mind to.
I'm here with Xander Isaacson, the founder and CEO of Xeal. Xander, thanks for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Give me a 30-second pitch. Who are you and what do you do?
I'm Xander Isaacson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Xeal. And what Xeal is, we created the first self-reliant protocol, which makes payments, authentication, all of that work without cloud computing or the server, which basically means we just make electric vehicle charging stations work without any dependency on the internet. So no driver gets stranded, building managers never lose money on transactions, and we can accelerate the future with just a reliable charging experience.
Now, you're into the world of electronic EV charging. Make it exciting for me. Let's pull me in.
So when I first joined the industry, I don't belong in the industry. I was working in investment banking and I saw this really cool race that goes on in all these different cities, Tokyo and all throughout South America and Brooklyn. And it's sort of like F1, but it's called Formula E. The E stands for electric. So when I went to this race, I didn't even know what electric vehicles were besides a Tesla and those clunky cars.
Were they racing like Nissan Leafs? What was going on?
No, these look like F1 vehicles.
Okay.
They were lean, they were sharp. I didn't even know that. I had asked someone if these were electric. And then when the race goes off, they're going 200 miles per hour. You don't hear a thing. And the reason why they get these permits in these cities is because there's no noise pollution. Nobody hears it, so it doesn't annoy anybody.
Okay.
And then when I'm sitting there and I'm looking at these vehicles go, humming and going 200 miles per hour, they look like lean, literally normal race cars. One of them hovers over this blue glowing light in the road, and it got a huge power boost that allowed it to accelerate faster than the other vehicles. So when I'm reading all these things, preparing for a research commentary and everything, it made sense. It wasn't just these buzzwords, autonomous and connected and electric all moving together. It was the fact that this is literally a computer on wheels that can do anything. It's the future smartphone with unlimited processing
What's
power.
the blue thing it went over?
Bluetooth connected power vault.
Wow, so it's literally like a
Mario Kart.
It's like a video game. You hit the speed boost.
They literally modeled it after Mario Kart. Yeah.
So that got your mind of okay, this EV thing is
not just vehicles. It's the modern day iPhone times 1,000. It's the idea that it's the same transition from horses to cars, as now you're in this spaceship that you don't feel the road at all. You can do unlimited things, and most of these new models, the Hyundai, the Kia, the Ford F-150 Lightning, they have self-driving. They can move their own lanes, and it's exciting.
So what made you go from seeing that moment of seeing the EVs racing to I'm going to be an entrepreneur to this is what I'm going to do? Tell me that evolution.
That goes a little bit back. I was always very entrepreneurial. I think in elementary school, I was buying Yu-Gi-Oh cards and putting them in a white little paper, folding it up. In high school, I used to buy these watches from Amazon and I'll resell them. And then when I got to college, that's when my motivation really took off of I'm capable of anything I put my mind to. And that kind of came from the wrestling days in high school.
Okay.
And to go a little more back, I was awful at wrestling, the worst. I lost every single match. And there was this quote on the wall, and it was from Dan Gable. And it said, "He who says he can and he who says he can't are both usually right." So I brought the mentality when I got to school. And Penn State is, there's 50,000 students. And I found out about this little fund called the Nitty Line Fund. And it's a student-run hedge fund where they manage real investor capital, no endorsements at all, no endowments at all. It's $13 million now. And 10 people get in a semester, and I went for it my freshman year. I didn't get in. And then I went for it again my second year, and I got in. And then the next 3 years was just about finance and getting a job on Wall Street.
When you're in that fund, are you supposed to invest in fellow students or alumni? What was?
No, so we operate very similar to like a mutual fund.
Okay.
So we have all the different sectors of the S&P. And there's the IT sector, there's the oil and gas sector, there's the energy sector is part of that, the healthcare sector, and you basically manage a real portfolio of funds from alumni investors.
Gotcha. You're managing public money. Public investing from
yes,
endowment. Okay.
Exactly. So I put my head down for 3 years, and then I finally got the job, and I got back to senior year at Penn State when everybody's, not going all out anymore, and I looked into the startup community, and I brought back that childhood passion of mine. And there was not a student-run venture capital fund or an accelerator at the time, so I just made it my passion project my senior year to build this ecosystem of entrepreneurship where we would help students get jobs in VC or startups and help foster the startup community. And that little project turned into a contagious passion of mine, where the easy part was starting it. The hard part was recruiting students that all across different schools, like engineering school, and I would go to like blockchain events and hackathons, and I would just like recruit these students. And then one of the events I went to was this, it was a TED Talk at Penn State.
Okay.
It's about 2,000 student auditorium. I go in there by myself, sit in the back row, and this student walks on stage. And I didn't expect there to be a student. And the student goes on stage and he says, "My name is Nikhil Bradwaj. I'm a 19-year-old Indian immigrant. I moved here with no friends or family with one life mission to solve climate change without bothering people." And he became our head of technology.
That's quite a statement right there.
Yeah, and I was like,
quite a goal.
I was like, not shoving it down anybody's throat, making it interesting, objective. So we became really good friends, and he joined my little, club. And then fast forward, when I started investment banking, I was always keeping in touch with the engineers and founders in my network on the weekends, talking through some of their ideas. So it was a mix of seeing this, knowing my buddy on the West Coast was working at Schneider Electric, doing EV charging and all this stuff. And I called him up felt like a little kid again. And I'm like, "What's going on? I see there's 500 new models coming out. They're all supposed to be autonomous driving. This is way bigger than just transportation. This is the future of computing, how we connect with, how we do computing different things. It's a revolution." And that's when I did what any practical person would do. I quit my job a couple weeks later. I moved out to California, and I lived on Nikhil, my co-founder's couch, for 6 months, and 2 naive founders building Xeal.
And tell me what Xeal is. Like, what did you guys build? What was the mission, and what did you guys create?
Yeah, so the mission is, we put our personal values and mission statement into the company, so that solving climate change without bothering people was our mission going into it.
Okay.
Being a first-time founder, you don't really know what you're doing. So when we first started, we were just a reservation app, helping cars reserve chargers, and they would do it at times when it was cheap for the building and good for the environment. Tried selling that. Lesson learned. You got to have a product, not a feature.
Gotcha. So it was like an open table for chargers, kind of thing. If you're
Sure, yeah.
If you're playing Mad Libs here.
Yeah, without making any revenue or having a salary or anything like that. So then, I put on the sales hat. Never thought I would do sales in my life. And I'm going out there. I'm talking to these folks, property owners and managers. We sold to commercial real estate and multifamily properties. And they told me they want payments and energy management and access control, being able to get to choose who uses the charger.
Okay.
So like a hotel, I could take your key away and I could charge you for the candy at a margin. So we had to build a full connected system that works like your Uber app, and you can turn it on, turn it off, and pay for your sessions. So we built that, we put it inside a charging station, and we started selling the charger, the software, and we went to market. And super exciting, we got about 12 different properties right away. We're off to the races. I thought we're finally gonna fundraise and maybe have a salary once again. And that's when all hell broke loose. And that was the moment when the app wouldn't connect to the charger wouldn't connect to this cloud, which we found out later, it's not this imaginary thing above our heads, it's a physical server that sits in the middle of the country. And everybody was getting stranded. I was getting death threat emails because I was the customer success email. I hope your CEO dies. I hope your company goes bankrupt. Some other things.
You're getting company threats.
I think they thought they were, talking to a robot.
Okay.
But it was like, I hope your CEO dies. Like the company's like, I'm stranded again. So we realized it's not just a social media app or something like that. These are people's lives, and they're depending on us to get around and do their things. So in 2019, 3 things happened. Our back was against the wall. We didn't have any money. COVID happened. So there was this, a little popularity growing with contactless payments. And the second thing that happened was that there was this new concept that instead of sending information to that physical server across the country that we call the cloud, you could send information through devices directly, just like a TV remote.
Okay, yep.
And it was called distributed ledger. Just think of it as just packets of data. So we knew that. And then the third thing that happened was it just became possible to sort of send this through smartphones and smart devices like a charger. So we made it our mission to eliminate the internet, eliminate the cloud, and build a truly self-reliant experience where you go down there, it works 100% of the time, the payments, there's no loss, and a driver's never worrying about their car not working and being stranded again.
Yeah, so you're building chargers, but instead of it ping pong, each one is independent, right? So it can do it all. It can charge, pay, connect without having to connect to a server, like you said, somewhere in the middle of the country. It's its own vertically integrated system right there.
Yeah.
And that gives you reliability and precision and all that stuff.
Right. It's like the way I like to think about it, because I'm not technical. The technical knowledge I know is from being around very intelligent people. It's sort of like being a kid, where currently today, when you depend on the cloud, if you ask me a question, I would have to go run back to my mom and dad and say, do you know the answer to this? And then run back and tell you the answer. Sort of like that scene in Good Will Hunting when the guy is just plagiarizing the words of someone else from a textbook. And he's like, do you have any thoughts of your own?
Yeah.
But we call these things smart devices. But they're only smart if they have a connection to their mom and dad across the country. So what we've done is we took that brain across the country, the server, and we put it inside all of the devices, not just one of them, so they could all think, act, and process on their own. So the idea behind it is that, yes, it works in underground garages, but it thrives in places that have good connectivity because it's just faster, more reliable, and it always works.
Do you guys make the units yourself, manufacture them yourself, design them yourself?
So we're asset light. We work with different manufacturers, and we essentially make a custom product with them where we put our computer inside of it, either through a digital computing layer, or we put a physical board that acts like a computer.
Cool. How do you make money?
It's a good question. So we focus on the largest real estate institutions in North America. The reason why we went that path is because when all these EV charging companies were selling to the path of least resistance, where there's subsidies and rebates and places that they're welcome, we said if Xeal didn't exist today, what wouldn't exist? And with 40% of Americans living in apartments, we wanted to create that access. So we focused on the real estate market, going to the top owners and operators that own the majority of land. And we sell to them a hardware charging station, which we make a little margin on. And then we have a software subscription that the building manager pays. So they can manage all of this charging sites. They can change the rates. They can make custom access, like the staff might get a discount on charging, while the residents might get this. If someone moves out of the building, they can kick them off so nobody's going back there and using it. So that's the subscription, and then we have a revenue share where think of it as like, they pay $10 for a session, and we'll make a piece of that.
Gotcha. As well. So it's a SaaS model, right? So you
can
make a little money on the hardware, you get that great recurring revenue for them to use your software, and then if they're being used, the more they're being used, the more you make because you get a piece of that too.
Exactly, and then the last component, which we sell as a software protocol, is our computing layer. That's the thing that makes it work. So a lot of people have this idea that software runs the world, but it's what runs software. And that's the thing you don't see, the computing layer that allows the functions to work. And because we own that, which is similar to Amazon having Amazon Web Services, that part of the value chain is one that makes us unique, where we're the only ones that have that stack, and we're the only ones, so we sell that to the customer as well.
How many employees do you have?
We're a lean team, about 45 to 50. So we have an ops team, engineering team of about 14 all in-house, and then a sales team. But we're not going door to door. We take a very thoughtful, holistic approach. We have a territory team that they work with our real estate partners, and then we also have a kind of thing as like a franchise model where we have channel partners that resell our chargers.
What do you see as obviously you're all in on EV, you're excited about EV. A couple of years ago, there was a huge push even from the manufacturers saying they have all these companies, American, you name it, are going to build electric vehicles. And there's been a big blowback now, and there's a lot of demand has fallen. What do you see right now would you see that as people is it hype? Are people being overly negative? What's kind of like right now the snapshot of the
I'm ecstatic.
world? Yeah, obviously you're ecstatic.
No, I'm saying because, back in 2019, 2020, there was no press. It was all, and the press that came out, it was just from the clean tech industry. So how are you going to get someone from outside the industry without an objective source and get them to come in for different reasons? I like to think of it as like politics. When it's not an exciting topic unless there's two sides of it. So I think it's great for the industry, but the reality is the EV industry has more EVs selling than they've ever had before. And last year alone in 2023, there was 1.6 million EVs sold. Fast forward it took 10 years to sell the first million EVs in the US. So when you think about that, it took 10 years, and then it took 2 years for the first million, and then it took 1 year for 1.5 last year, and we're still ramping up with all these new models we haven't had before, with the Hyundai Ioniq, which is the cheapest lease in America now, beyond gas cars. It's just kind of nonsense.
What are you focused on? What is the company aiming for in the next year?
Yeah, so we're very grateful for our investors and what it allows us to accomplish. The real things that we're excited about is our partnerships. We have this white glove approach with some of our biggest real estate leaders, and these aren't just groups, checking the ESG box. Like, these are groups that they want to be bold, they want to be a pioneer, and they realize that they are the people that have the keys to accelerating the future. So we believe the rate of the future is not decided by an expert opinion. It's decided by the people that have the market and will feed into the technology that's going to accelerate it. So for us, next year, in the next 18 months, we're looking to expand our real estate partner community. We're looking to expand our channel partners. These are the ones that they're experts in electrical and lighting, and now they're reselling Xeal as their top EV charging choice. And then in the background, on the technology side, we have some really exciting things going on. We're leveraging our core technology, the self-reliant protocol that allows you to do internet-free payments and all that fun stuff. We're going to be working with one of the largest manufacturers to embed it inside their chargers. And then outside that, we have another exciting pilot, which I can't talk too much about, but we're licensing our payment to a completely different vertical. And that's kind of the future of our technology, where EV charging is our first application. We want to accelerate that future. But beyond that, we see any shared smart device, whether that's payment terminals, smart access control, turning it on through the phone, even like Uber, DoorDash. You don't have to you get beer delivered to your home. You don't need to show your license and wait for to load. It just does it right away. And our goal is to accelerate that self-sufficient smart city, where it just uncaps the possibility for smart cities to grow anywhere, regardless of the resources they have.
Outside of charging, what are you excited about in the EV world right now? Everyone's hearing about the next couple of years. I will never buy an EV. I'm always leasing one because, like I said, it's like you're buying a very expensive computer, and the technology. I feel like it's like you're buying the last tube TV before the flat screens come out. I feel like in the next couple of years, there's going to be a huge explosion of technology. Maybe it's like crazy fast charging on the car. Maybe it's extreme, range and that sort of stuff. What are you what's happening right now that you're excited about? And I know there's a lot of rumors, but again, this is not about your company. This is about the
No.
What's going to blow our minds in the next 2 years?
So I think first, the market. When I was reading all those little articles and getting excited about the EV race, what blew my mind wasn't the U.S. manufacturers. It was that this was already happening on a global scale. The Hyundai, the Kias, the
China with
Mercedes, BMW, 15% of their car sales globally. In the U.S. as well, is electric. They're better selling. People are liking these things, so they're flooding the U.S. markets. And while it's great for the US-based manufacturers to be scaling as well, it's going to happen regardless. So when I look at this market, I sort of think of it as like the first BlackBerry, right? And it's like, you know, the naysayers, skeptics, or what do I need to send emails on my phone for? That's just inefficient. Or when the first iPhone came out, right? Everybody, there was long lines and people were excited, but the other side, the laggards, were like, what is this app store? What, am I going to play video games my whole life? They didn't think about the unlimited applications from Uber to DoorDash to Robinhood. Like,
so when's this big adoption going to happen? When's like the iPhone moment going to happen?
So I'm saying that, imagine that unlimited possibility is how I see electric vehicles. They're going to be self-driving. They're going to be, you don't even need to drive. It will park itself. They will be able to, you can even have it go out and do almost like ride sharing and picking people up and then making money on the side. Then it's a resource, not just for that aspect, it's a resource for transferring communications. We view telecom as all these different physical towers that communicate. Well, these are all distributed mobile servers where they're now able to communicate in a distributed fashion, which just leverages the resources in the world instead of just depleting it. And then beyond that, there's just really, really cool things on the energy side where the vehicle itself, you know, when you use like a portable iPhone charger? Yeah. Like it basically, you know, gives you energy, discharges energy from that stored thing. And that comes in handy when there's not an outlet nearby.
I have one in my backpack right now.
There you go. So the idea of electric vehicles not being a strain on the grid or utilities, but they'll actually be an asset where if you're plugging in overnight and you already have the full tank, you can now discharge that back to the grid or other vehicles, your neighbor, and things like that. And you build this kind of a distributed marketplace where we're actually able to do more without adding physical, larger resources, but just optimizing the system entirely.
That's bold predictions, my man. I like it. Xander Isaacson, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
You know, one of the most exciting ways to combat climate change is to accelerate a customer-led revolution to technologies that improve their lives. You know, it's nice to say, oh, you should do this or you should do that, but it's way better if we can provide technological solutions that actually improve customers' lives, and so they want them anyway. My name is Mary Powell, and I am the CEO of Sunrun.
The U.S. power grid is under strain. It's struggling to keep up with surging electricity demand, from AI data centers and electric cars to increased domestic manufacturing. The need for power is skyrocketing. And while large-scale wind and solar farms can help, connecting them to the grid takes years. But we currently generate more solar energy than we can store, particularly in places like California. So to maximize the impact of solar energy, battery storage that can hang on to that electricity is absolutely critical. Mary Powell, CEO of Sunrun, has a faster solution: more rooftop solar and battery storage units. Sunrun recently hit a major milestone, installing solar and battery systems in over 1 million U.S. homes. These systems create clean energy on-site and store it for later use, acting like small-scale power plants.
Sunrun is really so different than your traditional solar company. In fact, you know, we talk about ourselves as being a clean energy lifestyle company. We are that beloved, trusted partner of customers, of Americans that want to transition their experience with energy, and they want to move to a more predictable, affordable, resilient way to power their homes and their lives. And we've really made a significant transition over the last 18 months to be what we call a storage first company. So we went from installing storage with solar about 15% of the time 18 months ago to 54% of the time now. So our customers are customers that are capable of really having that affordable, reliable, resilient energy future that so many Americans are really demanding now as utility prices have gone up and as the reliability of so many utilities in the grid has become more strained and that reliability has gone down. To me, this acceleration of the customer-led revolution is so powerful because it is also the gateway to all of these other technological solutions that improve lives and happen to also really improve, emissions. Just Sunrun, what we've done already, we have saved consumers $1.3 billion.
In total, those 1 million homes generate at least 7 gigawatts of power and store 2 gigawatts of electricity. With electricity demand rising, rooftop solar is becoming a crucial part of the solution. The Energy Information Agency predicts solar power will be the top source of new energy this year, increasing by 42% in the second half. But the grid itself also needs urgent upgrade.
So I worked at a utility company called Green Mountain Power for 20 years. The last 12 years of which I was the CEO of the company. It's really funny because it's the one when I was first offered the opportunity to go to Green Mountain Power and work for a utility, I actually said no. And reportedly I said no 3 times, the CEO told me, before I finally said yes. And it became one of the most powerful lessons in life of I didn't know what I didn't know, because I had all of these ideas about what it would be like, and it was completely different. It ended up being like the most amazing opportunity to lead a radical transformation of a utility to become, as I like to call it, we were about becoming the unutility. We were about becoming innovative, customer obsessed, and delivering on an affordable, clean energy future. When I was the CEO of Green Mountain Power, way back in 2007, it became so clear to me that the grid of the past was not going to be the best grid of the future for the customers that we served, or really for any customers in America, that it foundationally was not built in an economically efficient way. And it certainly, as we were making the transition to clean energy, it certainly wasn't going to be the most effective way to deliver energy in the future. So as the CEO of Green Mountain Power, I actually leaned in hard to encouraging customers to go solar. Way back in 2007, we actually incented our customers to go solar, and we were the first utility in the United States to also put individual storage units, power walls at the time, into customer homes. So it's interesting that so many years later, I got the opportunity. I was asked if I would be interested. I was then on the board of Sunrun, and I was asked by the founders and the members of the board if I would be interested in becoming the next CEO of Sunrun. And it was one of those things, like I felt like, well, you kind of had me at hello, because this is the type of work I've been active in accelerating, really since I'd been in the energy business, but in a massive way since I had become CEO of a utility. As I joined the utility industry, there was a massive ice storm that literally took down massive steel tower transmission lines that were bringing power from Canada to the US. So that, on top of time after time after time, because I'm a boots on the ground leader, so if there was ever any kind of climatic event, I was out and about visiting crews, knocking on doors of customers, making sure they were okay. And I saw so many instances where we had just made investments to storm hardy lines, and then those lines were on the ground. So it was really obvious to me, again, that the US grid, it's a 100-plus-year-old system. It's not its fault, but it was not built for economic efficiency, and it was not built for climate resilience. And so while we were going to need to continue to make investments in that grid, it also was so obvious that we needed innovation. We needed technological innovation, and we needed to provide, just like you've seen in so many other aspects of our lives. I think cell phones are an amazing example, right? How they transformed, the technology that we now know as telecommunications, right? That the same kind of thing, the same opportunity existed in the energy space. So it was really exciting as solar started to take off, and then with storage, that really makes solar so much more incredibly valuable for the consumer, but also for the grid. I did not always want to run an energy company. I grew up in New York City in an artistic home, and as I like to say, I actually felt sorry for people in business. I thought it seemed like a really kind of low value, boring existence. So I call myself the accidental executive. I truly feel like I've landed in the situations I have because I love people and I'm passionate about causes. And so, you know, I sort of fell into business because I didn't think I could support myself on my artistic talent at a young age. I was right about that. I don't think I would have been able to. And, you know, what I found is that my love of people, my love of cause, and my deep belief always that, like, to do great things requires amazing people, like, all wanting to accomplish the same thing together. And so that's, you know, I fell in love with leadership and leading change, and then the energy space just became such an incredibly powerful space for driving dramatic change, you know, expressing my passion for people and for providing solutions to customers. What I love about Sunrun, and when I think about the future, I get so excited because I feel like, oh my gosh, we're at 1 million customers. Oh my gosh, we're installing storage now over 50% of the time. We also have launched EV chargers, smarter panels. We're working on bundling products and services for customers for the future. And so when I look to the future, you know, I love to laugh with the team and think, oh my gosh, like, it'll be so fun, like 5 years from now, to laugh at how we thought hitting 1 million was so exciting. Like, it is truly about being the leader in, like, leading this customer-led revolution to a way better way to power homes, to power our lives, to power our transportation, and ultimately to power America's grid. Way back in 2015, as a utility executive, we demonstrated that by having storage and solar on homes, in homes, that we could actually reduce the cost of the grid for all the customers that we served. We would leverage those sources during peak summer months. We would leverage those to, what I always said the goal was not to beat down the peak, it was to flatten and crush the demand so that you're spreading it evenly over time and you're making the grid more cost effective by doing that. So it's really exciting that now, so many years later, Sunrun is at the scale where we literally have 16,000 customers enrolled in a program in California to help the grid for a significant period of time, leveraging all of those resources that are in homes, providing so much value to the consumer, but then also helping to make the grid more affordable and reliable for all.
Hendrik, thank you so much for being here today with me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, so explain it to me in the most basic of terms. What exactly does your company do?
Yeah, Sunrun offers a solution for autonomous electric trucking. So why do we do this? We want to make our supply chains more resilient. So trucking, what is really the backbone of global trade, is facing major problems with the labor shortages. So alone in Europe, we have a shortage of 2 million truck drivers by 2026. And it's super important that when we have increasing volumes in transportation and fewer truck drivers, that we solve this issue, since otherwise those moments that everyone remember from COVID times when you enter a supermarket and there's empty supermarket shelves, this will become the new normal. And therefore we decided, hey, let's face this problem and tackle it and offer a solution to overcome the truck driver shortage and also electrify the trucking industry. And how we do this is that we actually start very pragmatic, since when you're speaking about autonomous vehicles, everyone thinks, this is so far away, it's a moonshot. There were so many promises, and we want to be very pragmatic and offer a solution now. And what we did there is that we tackle use cases that work in constrained environments, so where you have a geofenced area, for example, in a port, so a container terminal where cargo is moved at relatively low speeds. And there's where autonomous driving works today. And this is what Sunrun's USP is, that we combine in our approach to autonomy, we call this human-assisted autonomy, really the best out of both worlds, so human intelligence and artificial intelligence in a hybrid setup.
So how exactly does that work, and who is the one controlling it or using it?
Yeah, so when you imagine a truck driver today, we take that same person, bring it into an office location in that port, let them remotely drive the vehicles, and there's obviously not so much benefit when you just have it one-to-one bring the person from truck to an office, but as our trucks are already driving 80 to 90% of the time autonomously right now, this person can manage today 4 trucks simultaneously. And what they actually do is assisting in some planned maneuvers, like precisely maneuvering the truck under a crane, or when there is an edge case. We had a really random one in the last week where a seagull was stopping in front of the truck, and our truck is always programmed to not hit any obstacle, right? And therefore it stopped. Then it called the remote operator sitting in that office for assistance. The operator connected with that vehicle, saw it's just a seagull, continue your mission vehicle, and the vehicle continues its mission. And thereby we achieve this productivity gain of 1-2-4-1 operator controlling 4 trucks.
Interesting. Now, I know you said it's in a controlled location.
Yeah.
Is there ever a future in which you want to bring these out onto the roads?
Yeah, so this is really step 1 of our journey. So we want to start where it's feasible today, where we can create value for our customers, and then grow with that same customer base and with that same technology in more complex environments. For example, going into like the 5-kilometer routes around the sites where you connect highly repetitive routes between the port and warehouses. And yeah, this is then step 2 of our journey. And when we are allowed to really think big and achieving our vision is that we automate the physical world, so bringing automation wherever humans and machines can work hand in hand together.
Now talk to me about the founding story. How did this all come about?
Yeah, so Max, Michael, and me, we met at university, and both of them have PhDs in the autonomous driving space. And we decided in 2019 that we spin off the technology from the Technical University of Munich. So we had already one cornerstone locked in, that we use this kind of technology. And the second cornerstone was that we were very aligned of what kind of company we want to build. So we believe that there's an opportunity to build a generational technology company from Europe based on autonomous driving. So the open question was, hey, what kind of industry do we tackle? And then in 2020, the COVID times hit every one of us, and we experienced what it means when supply chains are broken. So we spent some time with trucking customers in the logistics industry, and yeah, we decided, let's overcome those shortages of the trucking industry. It's really, really huge. It's the backbone of everything, but it's poised for disruption through autonomous driving and electrification. That's what we're doing now.
Very cool. Now, I'm curious about the safety aspects and any legality you face of this. How do you navigate the safety space and also legal barriers that you may face?
Yeah, so on the regulatory question, is it legal to take out the driver out of a cabin in this kind of environment? Yes, so it's private ground. This is one of the reasons why we decided for this use case where we start today on private geofenced areas, since you don't need to change any legislation. So that's one of the reasons. But also when you have an environment where you're not driving that fast, also what could go wrong is way more controlled and can be tackled with technology that is feasible today, and you don't need to solve unsolved science problems that are maybe unsolved for some use cases on the open roads where you're driving 80 kilometers per hour, need to see very, very far into the future and even predict what everyone is doing around you. This is what we don't need for solving the challenges we have today for our customers.
And speaking of customers, who are they, how many do you have, and what locations are you operating in?
Yeah, so we started 3 years ago when we brought the technology from the university into the trucking industry within geofenced areas, and there are basically 3 kind of use cases on distribution centers where you move trailers around warehouses. This is for DB Schenker, for example. Then we are moving cargo on big production facilities for Volkswagen, for example, and then containers on seaports, and this is what we do for the Port of Hamburg.
Very cool. Tell me about your fundraising journey and what having this amount of capital has afforded you.
Yeah, so we are a deep tech company, so we need a lot of funding to make this a reality, and we raised already our very first round directly when we founded the company. So we founded the company in 2019 in September, and even before actually founding the company, we had the first term sheets on the table from VCs, and this money allowed us then to bring the technology out of the lab into the real world, and over the last years finding product market fit, so really serving customers in a scalable way, and now making this a reality takes some money. It's not taking that money that like those AV companies were raising like billions, but we raised 50 million our Series A last year, and we will continue to raise money to build a generational technology from Europe.
That's awesome. Now I think autonomous vehicles is a really popular space to be in right now. How do you set yourself apart from all of the other companies out there doing very similar things that you are?
Yeah, it comes down to our approach. So we started the company based on the hypothesis that you should not tackle this in a moonshot approach. So some companies directly went for the most difficult use cases in the most difficult environments, like robotaxis in inner urban traffic or trucking at high speeds. This is a really hard problem to solve. Why not solving a problem that you can address today with technology that works today? And this is what we then applied in the yard space. And the second thing that is very controversial, even more controversial 5 years ago, was that we don't believe in full autonomy. So we believe in this human-assisted way, where we have a lot of autonomy, 80%, 90%, maybe 95%, but keeping this human in the loop allows us, what is most important for our customers in logistics, to guarantee 100% reliability from day one. And this is then also key for scaling, since a customer that is then ordering 100 trucks and they're not reliable would be a mess for the entire supply chain.
Absolutely. So going off that, how exactly are you using AI right now in your tech?
Yeah, so for those 80-90% autonomous features, you can basically use a very simple deterministic approach when it comes to autonomous driving. So this is step one on the technology journey. But as we are collecting a lot of data in real life operations every single day in paid customer operations, we can collect the data and then apply machine learning to solve also the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 9%. We will never solve the last percent, since we think it's important to keep the human in the loop and build this fallback layer with the human. But this is where we apply AI, for example. We also apply it in other parts of the tech stack. For example, when you imagine connecting the vehicle that is operating on a yard with an office, you need very good internet connectivity. And we have a lot of AI in making sure that this connection is super reliable, even without the need to have 5G.
What would it take for you to sell your company, and is that your end goal?
So I started the company with this clear vision of building a generational technology company. And like when we now sell after chapter 1 or chapter 2 of the story, this would not feel like the right thing to do. I really want to do this for the next 20, 30 years. And after solving autonomous driving for trucks in yards and then bring it to the open roads, there's so many more challenges that our society has with the labor shortages that can be overcome with this kind of technology. And what we want to do is redefine the role of humans in a fully automated way.
Is there one piece of advice that you would give your younger self the day before you started your company that you wish you knew now?
I think what's really important, especially when you're a young founder, is that you build a skill to trust your intuition. So I think I would give this advice to my younger self to do this even earlier and more without the need to get a lot of data for every decision, since then you can move way faster and are not waiting too long for some decisions that might be difficult, but where you had already the right answer and the right decision very early on in the decision process.
That's a great answer. And final question for you. What would you like your legacy to be?
Wow, I've not thought about this. So I think a lot about what is important in the next 24 months to deliver on the customer contracts we have and make them really, really happy, and also giving our team the resources, what they need to succeed, and really empower everyone on this journey to get closer to this end goal of building a company that can automate the physical world.
Excellent. Well, Hendrik, thank you so much for sharing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.